Alright. Are we working now? Can you hear me now? And if you can hear me and see me, please let me know what the audio is like, because I've never set the microphone up in this way before. So, please let me know how it's going. There we go. We're getting some chat on the screen. That's hopeful. Good stuff. All right. But can you hear me? Because again, I've set things up a little bit differently. You're saying you can see me. That's a start. That's a start. I'm just not 100% sure whether everything's set up properly, because I've been spending a couple of hours messing about again. Oh, you can hear me as well. Oh, good times. But what's the audio like? I could plug myself in and take a listen. Maybe I should. I just didn't really want to mess about and risk doubling up the audio or something. But is it a little bit quiet? Do I sound distant? Or is it just as normal? Can you not even tell there's anything different? But as you can see, the microphone's coming down like this, and it's a little bit further away than usual. I think especially if I settle into some reading position here, I think I'll be a little bit further away than usual. But I've been messing around for a couple of hours today, trying to make this new apartment work. I've been moving house, so it's all change, and I just thought, let's see if I can actually make. Oh, Olivia, thank you. You're saying maybe it's a little bit quieter. This is useful information. I've just turned it up a little bit, but if I need to turn it up a little bit more, then I will. But I'm really hoping to get some smoother audio as well, because I've never been massively happy with my audio quality for streaming. There's always just been like this tiny little sort of pop and crackle, and I think that might be something to do with the quality of the audio. I don't know if it was to do with bitrate or something else, but I was reading about it a couple of weeks ago, and I did play around with some of the settings, but I think those settings might have only been affecting Twitch streaming, not YouTube streaming. And I was spending so long messing about with the actual physical setup today, and a couple of things visually in the software that I just thought, okay, I'm not going to get lost in the audio sound of the side of things, and just hope that at least it's no worse. Thanks for the help as well, Bluefax. Nice to see you and appreciate that. I was pretty confident that the audio would be coming from the correct mic, and obviously it doesn't matter that it's upside down or anything. It was just more my proximity to the mic. And like I said, I should at least be running off the same audio settings as I have always used. But any slight changes that I made a couple of weeks ago, I think, like I said, might only be affecting Twitch. But I'd had enough messing about for one day, so I didn't want things to get any later than 6 o'clock my time, and I started pretty much bang on at 6 o'clock. So there we go. But I'll just say hello to a few of you, and it's lovely to see you in the chat, as always. It's been a little while since a live stream. Just before moving out of my old apartment, we had The Hobbit Chapter 2 and we had some of The Phantom of the Opera over on Twitch. So yeah, I've obviously been busy since I last saw you, not only moving house, but also bringing some new chapters of The Lord of the Rings to you, as well as a Tamaria Prince complete audiobook part 2, and we also had my original audiobook where I was tentatively showcasing some of my own writing that I'd been feeling rather inspired to put together whilst collecting some of my old things, sorting out old boxes and things, and I discovered this old diary which was pretty scantily written in, to be fair. It wasn't like I uncovered some tome, some like vast Balin's tomb like book that unraveled all these stories ready to be told. It was just a couple of pages of things that I'd written at a couple of different times, but it just triggered a certain thought process, and I felt like trying to put a few of those thoughts, memories, various bits and bobs down into some form of what could be the beginning of a story. So thank you for all the feedback on that original audiobook video. Massively appreciate it, and it was really interesting as well to see how different people interpreted that text so differently. I think some people looked at things quite literally, which is absolutely fine, and that was interesting in itself. Some people saw things a little bit more metaphorically, and it is really supposed to be an exploration of the imagination and life in general, without sounding too pretentious or sort of meta. But yeah, it's sort of like a little delve into the human psyche. You're sort of starting sort of from a child's perspective, and a child's imagination, and then into basically a teenager's perspective or imagination. Certain thoughts and scenarios that I was interacting with during my childhood, and then trying to tie those scenes in with all sorts of rambling thoughts that I do genuinely give a lot of consideration, and have since I've been as small as I can remember, really. It's sort of why we live, why we function as humans and animals, and how our interaction with the planet and other creatures and other humans, and it leads into relationships and friendships, and basically, like I was saying, a bit Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy sort of meaning of life level things. And then yeah, like after that second scene, we end up sort of taking things into the semi-present. I'm talking about running, like sort of what you think about whilst you're running, or what you don't think about whilst you're running, and ways of sort of distracting ourselves or sort of cleansing our mind in different ways. Sort of therapies that we give ourselves, whether consciously or subconsciously, on a daily or weekly basis or whatever, really. And then that leads into what appears to be still from the perspective of what you imagine as a human telling this story, into a scenario that seems to be a little bit more than meets the eye. Whiskers are mentioned, for example, and a few other things. And you can sort of piece together, like, oh, hang on a second, is this still a human that's running alongside the lake here by the forest, or has something else occurred? Is this again imagination? Is this a dream, or are we just following a different character here? And then this leads into sort of a fourth scenario where the ending Hello, Fox fans. Is anybody in the chat? I don't know if it's better just to restart, as so many people have got kicked out or have wandered off, of course, with the disconnection. I'm just on Discord. That was horrible, horrible, horrible timing with a power cut. Is anybody in, or am I best just to start again? That is the question. Seems like we've got people popping back in, but like I said, I'm not sure if it's better just to start a fresh stream. It's got so messy, and it's a shame because obviously a lot of you had the notification and popped straight in, which was wonderful. And I don't think I can see the live chat here now either, which is pretty annoying. So it's making it really tricky for me, because this chat, can I not refresh it here? Sorry, everybody. Thank you so much for being here, by the way. I so appreciate it. And I'm sorry for these technical issues. It really, really wasn't my fault. Not that it matters, but let's see if popping this out helps. Just popping the chat out. Oh, that could have helped, actually. And if I restore it, it's still the old chat. Strange. Bad times. Yeah. Had a power cut. A 5-minute power cut. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. So power is back up. Power is back up. It's like I said, it's just such a shame because there was about 30 of you in the chat when I lost power, and now we're down to 16, which is obviously, it's still lovely, and I really appreciate you being here, of course. But yeah, it's messed things up a little bit, to say the least. So yeah, I was wondering, would you hate me if I was to restart the stream? Like if I actually end this stream and start a new one? Because I know, Olivia, it literally is tradition. Whether it's my fault or the Wi-Fi or the chuffing power, there's always something. But I mean, well, it's not true. I think I had 6 streams in a row or something where I didn't have any problems at all. It felt like a miracle. But here we go. But hello to all of you that are here. I don't know who's left from before, and I was going to start going through all the old messages as well and welcoming everybody. But yeah, I think I'll do a restart. It'll throw out a new notification, And who knows, we might get that like original little bunch back again, which would be really nice. And then I can say hello to those people that did join in the first instance. So let's hope the power actually stays with me and we can have some reading. It's really annoying though. Like I hate it. I really hate it when the stream gets split like this and there's going to end up with 2 videos. It just ruins the flow. But yeah, that's the plan, Mabel. That is the plan. I would like to have chapter 3 of The Hobbit, and then I would like to have 3 more chapters of The Witches, and then we'll just take things from there. So I will. Yeah, I hope you do, Laurie. Welcome back to those of you that are popping back in. I really appreciate you hunting me down. But I'll just leave a comment in this chat that I'm restarting. I'm doubting myself now. I'm doubting whether this is a good idea. It could be a bad idea. I'm scared that people are going to get trapped in some sort of mishmash no man's land. Maybe it's silly. I would just really like to know what this stream's gonna look like. Yeah, I won't restart. I'm sorry for the mess. I thought we'd got it all going nice and smooth, and we have to have a power cut. You know, and there's 21 of you here. I just feel really bad like messing you about. You know, people should just see that it's live and they'll pop in if they want to. A lot of people don't even go straight to the notification. They might check in 20 minutes and then I'll just be live anyway. So I'll stick with it, hope for the best, and just, I can't see all the chat now. I've lost some of the chat at the top, but I will just say hello to Teresa if you're still here, because I know you were right in, and Shannon. And then I've missed a load of the chat, so I'm sorry about that. But hello to Bobby, and thanks ever so much, Bobby. And hello to Oaksage, and Miranda, and Olivia, and Jessie, Colorbrights, Victoria, and Anne, Juz. We had Bluefax in as well, fellow YouTuber and narrator of Tolkien. He makes wonderful stuff if you would like to check out Bluefax's channel. Rohan, the Alice, Manish, Laurie Jacob, That Random Seal, Sherry as well, and Lynette, aka Miss Bookworm, Mama Fox came in, and Nikki, and Teffy, and Debs, and 7-Eleven. And Neve, and Mabel, if I missed you, Mabel. And Logan's here now, and Jalal. Good stuff. Logan's still saying the volume is a bit on the weak side. And hello to John from Ireland. Hello to you. Really nice to see you all popping in. But yeah, I was asking about the volume earlier, Logan, and I was suspecting that it might be a little bit lower than normal because I've changed the setup a little bit. So I'll just ramp it up a little bit more. I'm tempted to even go higher than this, but I just don't want it to tear the audio too much because I'm obviously speaking quite quietly at the moment, but when reading, sometimes I can get a little bit carried away, and I don't want it to distort and clip the audio. So let me get the chat box back again. Is it a little bit better? Color Brights is saying that's perfect. No, but don't you remember this, Neve? On this, you can't be a different Neve, surely. How many Neves can be following me? But I'm pretty sure you were one of those many people that I messed up with a few weeks ago. I think my Irish, the Irish part of my brain was not at all switched on that day. And you just get used to all these different random names. Some things like don't seem to mean anything, or they're just all sorts of random fun things, or different languages and things like that. And I probably did call you Niam. But if you're a different Neve, then I apologize, but I'm not going to forget that now. Now I see it. It is saved. Oh yeah, you don't want the clip-in, Shannon. You do not want that. You do not want that. So yeah, hopefully the audio's okay now. I've got a nice little bunch of you. I'm glad I didn't restart. I'm not really sure how this is gonna present itself when I finish the stream. Hopefully these two bits of the stream, I had a power cut for anybody who's popping in. Lovely timing. But hopefully these two bits of the stream will get snipped together and it'll work okay. Oh, and hello to Lasse as well from Denmark. Good times. If you're not aware, I live in Sweden. I've just moved quite close to Uppsala now. I used to live in Stockholm, but we have moved. So I am from England, but live in Sweden, so not far away. And yeah, Mabel, I say lost as if it's mislaid somewhere, but I am no longer able to monetize my channel. So that is why you're not able to super chat. Yeah, so I know this is a very, very, very common thing on YouTube, unfortunately. A few of you have been saying, I'm aware that it is quite common for YouTubers or for channels to lose monetization and be demonetized. And sometimes it's very clear why that's the case. Sometimes it's very confusing, and I must say it's very confusing. I've had this same issue before, and I thought I'd got over it. So most of the time I've been on YouTube, which is, technically nearly 3 years now, even though this is my third channel. So it looks like I've not been here as long as I have. But for most of the time that I've been on YouTube making these videos and audiobooks and everything for you, I haven't been monetized. So that's why I've always said that Patreon has just been so incredible, and people sending me donations through PayPal and everything, because I obviously do put an awful lot of time into what I do. The editing alone can take 3, 4, 5 times as long as the recording process, which is always 2, 3, 4 times longer than the finished product, so a lot of time goes into this. So all that support through Patreon and PayPal has always been really incredible, especially as for probably about 90% or more of the time that I've been on YouTube, I've not been able to monetize my channel either. So but for 3 months, up until 3 weeks ago, those 3 months previously, almost exactly 90 days, I have been monetized, which has been fantastic. But I had an email 2 weeks ago or so, which was sort of like a auto-generated message, not a human message from someone at YouTube saying that it's been decided that you're no longer able to monetize. And it's very confusing. They use sort of like copy and paste bits of information, so it's really hard to know exactly why someone has deemed this to be the case. But after 1 month, you can reapply for the monetization, which I will do. And generally within 1, 2, 3, can be a little bit longer, weeks, you will find out whether they've accepted you or not. So hopefully I will be accepted back into the YouTube partner program, as they call it, and get that monetization back. But if you've noticed that for nearly all my videos, the adverts have disappeared, and that's why. And that's why you can't super chat like Mabel asked. So you can still support me through Patreon. You can still send me a donation through PayPal if you wish. Of course, it's not expected or anything like that, but it's just hugely appreciated. So that was Mabel asking about Super Chat. Oh, and hello as well to War Dogs and to Alice. Nice to see you. Oh, yeah, that is frustrating, Mabel. That is frustrating. Oh, and welcome to Don and Angela as well. Thank you very much. Nice to see you. Yeah, I mean, like everybody takes a cut one way or another. So you can choose if you really want to send a thank you. You just choose what you want to choose. Like for me, Patreon is probably the number one, because they do take a very small cut, and it's just a very reliable, nice way of being able to see some sort of monthly earnings. You put the work in, and the community, the crowdfunding as they call it, comes back to you each month. So you can rely on it in a way. You're never quite sure how each month's going to go, but Patreon is a really wonderful service, and they seem to really genuinely care about their creators and the content and everything. So yeah, I've always had a very, very, very good experience with Patreon. What else am I missing in the chat? I'm going to get started with some reading in literally just a couple of minutes, and I mean that. I know I can say that and then like ramble on for another 40 minutes, but I really, really want to get reading. But I just always like to take this time and just mingle a little bit with you and see what you're saying. Yeah, they have paid out on the ad revenue which was already earned, Olivia. There is a backlog though. It's like with most things, so there is a chance that the last month's earnings will be put on hold. I'm not quite sure, but months prior to that, those couple of months prior to that have come through. And when I was very briefly monetized quite a few months ago, sometime at the end of last year, that little bit, it was only a little bit, but that little bit dropped in as well. So as long as you don't lose your channel altogether, because I have had that happen where I've had some advertising revenue and even some of your super chat revenue stacking up, and then when I had redfoxvoice deleted, for example, and it was the same with when I lost my original Stephen Garnett channel, it seems to get them out of paying that to me. So even though they've been running those adverts, I think YouTube just goes, well, your channel's been deleted, so but if you're just having your channel demonetized, it seems like the revenue still does come back to you, even if there's some delay there. Oh, and hello to Mango dropping in. I know you've been very eager for some more witches. Nice to see you. Oh, that's nice to hear, War Dogs. And there are a bunch of you waiting for new Dracula chapters, and they will come, I promise. I mean, Lord of the Rings, of course, is more popular than Dracula, and I've just been so enjoying Lord of the Rings, so that's a couple of reasons why I've been focusing a little bit more on Lord of the Rings than on Dracula, but Dracula will absolutely return. Chapter 14 of Dracula is about 50% complete, so I just need to get back to that, finish the editing, and there will be some new content coming your way there. Oh, and Jalal's asking about Harry Potter. I won't go into the whole thing because I've chatted about it so many times, but Harry Potter is something that I have recorded and produced before. I finished the first 3 books, and I was about a quarter of the way through The Goblet of Fire, but I was stomped out by Penguin Random House, which is one of the main publishers of Harry Potter. So I had to stop producing Harry Potter, unfortunately, Jalal, and it was an absolute pleasure. and it was at the time the most popular thing that I had on my old channel. So Lord of the Rings and like my old Hobbit recording and The Secret Garden and other bits and bobs have of course been very popular, but Harry Potter was a hit. So it hurts in a couple of ways that I'm not able to keep producing Harry Potter, unfortunately. You can listen to what I have produced. You can support me on Patreon and you can access things that I've already produced, but I can't produce new chapters, unfortunately. And cheers to political science, I'm guessing. That's interesting. Good subject. Welcome, poli-sci. Thanks very much. Hope I'm not missing anything here. Quite a lot of chat dropping in. Oh, and hello to Lightweaver. Very nice to see you. Very nice to see you. Alright, good stuff. Okay, let me get started. If I've missed anybody dropping in, I do apologise, but know that I'm very happy to have you here. So, yes, I'm going to get started. I'm just going to swap things around 1 second on here. Yeah, because I had that disconnection. My chat box is not displaying it properly, so I'm just moving my windows around so I can see this little popped out chat box. And yeah, like just before I start, I just want to confirm that everybody is happy with the audio quality. Like if I sit back, I've got a new squeaky chair for you, by the way. You might notice it here and there, just for old time's sake. But if I sit back like this, how is the audio? I'd really like to know whether you think it's a little bit too quiet, or if you think we're okay as we are. I mean, I may speak a little bit louder at times, but I would like the audio to be at a comfortable level. And I absolutely can increase it. It still looks okay to do so. I just would like to hear your opinion. You saying it's okay? War Dogs is saying sounds great. I'm sorry, Lynette. I'm sorry. I've got a method. I've got a method, Lynette. You're saying it sounds good. All right. Before the lizards come out. I can't even imagine having that sort of problem. I wonder what Harry would make of lizards in the back garden, Mama Fox. I know I've got the good old moonshine on the go, Logan. It's absolutely vital. You're saying there's a little headroom, Bluefax. Yeah, I feel like I could crank it up. I'm just concerned that if I was to, like, I mean, I'm not reading The Witches at the moment because that is one of those where I get very excited, and I feel like I'm just going to tear the audio to pieces. But little bit of a spoiler alert, but this is a calmer Hobbit chapter. You know, chapter 2 with the trolls. I was stood up as well. I was in full theatrical mode for those trolls, and things get a little bit crazy. But chapter 3 of the Hobbit is just taking things down a level a little bit. So, all right, I'm just gonna run this and see how it goes. And thanks for your help with the audio. Do appreciate it. You're on full volume. Yeah, well, we'll see how it goes. So, I'm going to get started with some of J.R.R. Tolkien's The Hobbit. And I know some of you are incredibly familiar with this. Some of you have listened to my very, very old and crude The Hobbit audiobook from a few years ago. Some of you have hopefully listened to my couple of live readings that we had a few weeks ago. If not, just enjoy some live reading of an absolutely beautiful story. And if you're very familiar, or if you're up to date with the chapters, then I expect you'll enjoy it even more. It's a wonderful story. And after this, we will continue Roald Dahl's The Witches, which is an absolute favourite of all involved. Okay. No more power cuts, please, okay? Fox gods, protect. So, The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien. Chapter 3. A Short Rest. They did not sing or tell stories that day, even though the weather improved, nor the next day, nor the day after. They had begun to feel that danger was not far away on either side. They camped under the stars, and their horses had more to eat than they had, for there was plenty of grass, but there was not much in their bags, even with what they had got from the trolls. One morning they forded a river at a wide shallow place full of the noise of stones and foam. The far bank was steep and slippery. When they got to the top of it, leading their ponies, they saw that the great mountains had marched down very near to them. Already they seemed only a day's easy journey from the feet of the nearest. Dark and drear it looked, though there were patches of sunlight on its brown sides, and behind its shoulders the tips of snow peaks gleamed. "Is that the mountain?" asked Bilbo in a solemn voice, looking at it with round eyes. He'd never seen a thing that looked so big before. "Of course not," said Balin. "That is only the beginning of the Misty Mountains. We've got to get through, or over, or under those somehow, before we can come into Winterland below. And it is a deal of a way even from the other side of them to the lonely mountain in the east, where Smaug lies on our treasure." "Oh," said Bilbo. And just at that moment, he felt more tired than he ever remembered feeling before. He was thinking once again of his comfortable chair before the fire in his favourite sitting room in his hobbit hole, and of the kettle singing. Not for the last time. Now Gandalf led the way. "We must not miss the road, or we shall be done for," he said. "We need food, for one thing, and rest in reasonable safety. Also, it is very necessary to tackle the Misty Mountains by the proper path, or else you will get lost in them, and have to come back and start at the beginning again, if you ever get back at all." They asked him where he was making for, and he answered, "You are come to the very edge of the wilds, as some of you may know. Hidden somewhere ahead of us is the fair valley of Rivendell, where Elrond lives, in the last homely house. I sent a message by my friends, and we are expected." That sounded nice and comforting, but they had not got there yet, and it was not so easy as it sounds to find the last homely house west of the mountains. There seemed to be no trees, and no valleys, and no hills to break the ground in front of them, only one vast slope going slowly up and up to meet the feet of the nearest mountain. A wide land, the colour of heather and crumbling rock, with patches and slashes of green grass and moss green, showing where water might be. Morning passed. Afternoon came. But in all the silent waste there was no sign of any dwelling. They were growing anxious, for they saw now that the house might be hidden almost anywhere between them and the mountains. They came on unexpected valleys, narrow with steep sides, that opened suddenly at their feet, and they looked down surprised to see trees below them and running water at the bottom. There were gullies that they could almost leap over, but very deep, with waterfalls in them. There were dark ravines that one could neither jump over nor climb into. There were bogs, some of them green, pleasant places to look at, with flowers growing bright and tall. But a pony that walked there with a pack on its back would never have come out again. It was indeed a much wider land from the ford to the mountains than ever you would have guessed. Bilbo was astonished. The only path was marked with white stones, some of which were small, and others were half covered with moss or heather. Altogether, it was a very slow business following the track, even guided by Gandalf, who seemed to know his way about pretty well. His head and beard wagged this way and that as he looked for the stones, and they followed his lead. But they seemed no nearer to the end of the search when the day began to fail. Tea time had long gone by, and it seemed supper time would soon do the same. There were moths fluttering about, and the light became very dim, for the moon had not yet risen. Bilbo's pony began to stumble over roots and stones. They came to the edge of a steep fall in the ground so suddenly that Gandalf's horse nearly slipped down the slope. "Here it is at last," he called, and the others gathered round him and looked over the edge. They saw a valley far below. They could hear the voice of hurrying water in a rocky bed at the bottom. The scent of trees was in the air, and there was a light on the valley side across the water. Bilbo never forgot the way they slithered and slipped in the dusk down the steep zigzag path into the secret valley of Rivendell. The air grew warmer as they got lower, and the smell of the pine trees made him drowsy, so that every now and again he nodded and nearly fell off, or bumped his nose on the pony's neck. Their spirits rose as they went down and down. The trees changed to beech and oak, and there was a comfortable feeling in the twilight. The last green had almost faded out of the grass when they came at length to an open glade not far above the banks of the stream. It smells like elves, thought Bilbo, and he looked up at the stars. They were burning bright and blue. Just then, there came a burst of song like laughter in the trees. "Oh, what are you doing, and where are you going? Your ponies need shoeing, the river is flowing. Oh, tra-la-la-la-lee, here down in the valley. Oh, what are you seeking, and where are you making? The faggots are reeking, the bannocks are baking. Oh, trill-lil-lil-lolly, the valley is jolly, ha-ha. Oh, where are you going, with beards all a-wagging? No knowing what brings Mr. Baggins, and barlin and dwalin down into the valley in June, ha-ha. Oh, will you be staying, or will you be flying? Your ponies are straying, the daylight is dying. To fly would be folly, to stay would be jolly, and listen and hark till the end of the dark to our tune. Ha ha! So they laughed and sang in the trees, and pretty fair nonsense, I dare say you think it. Not that they would care. They would only laugh all the more if you told them so. They were elves, of course. Soon Bilbo caught glimpses of them as the darkness deepened. He loved elves, though he seldom met them, but he was a little frightened of them too. Dwarves don't get on well with them. Even decent enough dwarves like Thorin and his friends think them foolish, which is a very foolish thing to think. Or get annoyed with them. For some elves tease them and laugh at them, and most of all, at their beards. "Well, well," said a voice. "Just look! Bilbo the Hobbit on a pony, my dear! Isn't it delicious?" Then off they went into another song as ridiculous as the one I have written down in full. At last, one, a tall young fellow, came out from the trees and bowed to Gandalf and to Thorin. "Welcome to the valley," he said. "Thank you," said Thorin, a bit gruffly, but Gandalf was already off his horse and among the elves, talking merrily with them. "You are a little out of your way," said the elf. "That is, if you are making for the only path across the water and to the house beyond. We will set you right, but you had best get on foot until you are over the bridge. Are you going to stay a bit and sing with us, or will you go straight on? Supper is preparing over there," he said. "I can smell the wood fires for the cooking." Tired as he was, Bilbo would have liked to stay a while. Elvish singing is not a thing to miss in June under the stars, not if you care for such things. Also, he would have liked to have a few private words with these people that seemed to know his names and all about him, although he had never seen them before. He thought their opinion of his adventure might be interesting. Elves know a lot, and are wondrous folk for news, and know what is going on among the peoples of the land as quick as water flows, or quicker. But the dwarves were all for supper as soon as possible just then, and would not stay. On they all went, leading their ponies, till they were brought to a good path, and so at last to the very brink of the river. It was flowing fast and noisily, as mountain streams do of a summer evening, when sun has been all day on the snow far up above. There was only a narrow bridge of stone without a parapet, as narrow as a pony could well walk on, and over that they had to go, slow and careful, one by one, each leading his pony by the bridle. The elves had brought bright lanterns to the shore, and they sang a merry song as the party went across. "Don't dip your beard in the foam, father," they cried to Thorin, who was bent almost onto his hands and knees. "It is long enough without watering it." "Mind Bilbo doesn't eat all the cakes," they called. "He is too fat to get through keyholes yet." "Hush, hush! Good people, and good night," said Gandalf, who came last. "Valleys have ears, and some elves have over-merry tongues. Good night." And so at last they all came to the last homely house, and found its doors flung wide. Now, it is a strange thing, but things that are good to have and days that are good to spend are soon told about, and not much to listen to. while things that are uncomfortable, palpitating, and even gruesome may make a good tale and take a deal of telling anyway. They stayed long in that good house, 14 days at least, and they found it hard to leave. Bilbo would gladly have stopped there forever and ever, even supposing a wish would have taken him right back to his hobbit hole without trouble. Yet there is little to tell about their stay. The master of the house was an elf friend, one of those people whose fathers came into the strange stories before the beginning of history, the wars of the evil goblins and the elves, and the first men in the north. In those days of our tale, there were still some people who had both elves and heroes of the north for ancestors, and Elrond, the master of the house, was their chief. He was as noble and fair in face as an elf lord, as strong as a warrior, as wise as a wizard, as venerable as a king of dwarves, and as kind as summer. He comes into many tales, but his part in the story of Bilbo's great adventure is only a small one, though important, as you will see, if we ever get to the end of it. His house was perfect, whether you liked food or sleep, or work, or storytelling, or singing, or just sitting and thinking best, or a pleasant mixture of them all. Evil things did not come into that valley. I wish I had time to tell you even a few of the tales, or one or two of the songs that they heard in that house. All of them, the ponies as well, grew refreshed and strong in a few days there. Their clothes were mended as well as their bruises, their tempers, and their hopes. Their bags were filled with food and provisions light to carry, but strong to bring them over the mountain passes. Their plans were improved with the best advice. So the time came to Midsummer Eve, and they were to go on again with the early sun on midsummer morning. Elrond knew all about runes of every kind. That day he looked at the swords they had brought from the troll's lair, and he said, "These are not troll-make. They are old swords, very old swords of the High Elves of the West, my kin. They were made in Gondolin for the Goblin Wars. They must have come from a dragon's hoard or goblin plunder, for dragons and goblins destroyed that city many ages ago. This, Thorin, the rune's name Orcrist, the goblin cleaver in the ancient tongue of Gondolin. It was a famous blade. This, Gandalf, was Glamdring, foe hammer, that the king of Gondolin once wore. Keep them well." "Whence did the trolls get them, I wonder?" said Thorin, looking at his sword with new interest. "I could not say," said Elrond. "But one may guess that your trolls had plundered other plunderers, or come on the remnants of old robberies in some hold in the mountains. I've heard that there are still forgotten treasures of old to be found in the deserted caverns of the mines of Moria, since the dwarf and goblin war." Thorin pondered these words. "I will keep this sword, in honour," he said. "May it soon cleave goblins once again." "A wish that is likely to be granted soon enough in the mountains," said Elrond. "But show me now your map." He took it and gazed long at it, and he shook his head. For if he did not altogether approve of dwarves and their love of gold, he hated dragons and their cruel wickedness, and he grieved to remember the ruin of the town of Dahl and its merry bells, and the burned banks of the bright river running. The moon was shining in a broad silver crescent, He held up the map, and the white light shone through it. "What is this?" he said. "There are moon letters here, beside the plain runes which say, 5 feet high the door, and 3 may walk abreast." "What are moon letters?" asked the Hobbit, full of excitement. He loved maps, as I have told you before, and he also liked runes and letters and cunning handwriting, though when he wrote himself, it was a bit thin and spidery. "Moon letters are rune letters, but you cannot see them," said Elrond. "Not when you look straight at them. They can only be seen when the moon shines behind them, and what is more, with the more cunning sort, it must be a moon of the same shape and season as the day when they were written. The dwarves invented them, and wrote them with silver pens, as your friends could tell you. These must have been written on a midsummer's eve in a crescent moon, a long while ago." "What do they say?" asked Gandalf and Thorin together, a bit vexed perhaps that even Elrond should have found this out first, though really there had not been a chance before, and there would not have been another until goodness knows when. "Stand by the grey stone when the thrush knocks," read Elrond, "and the setting sun with the last light of Durin's day will shine upon the keyhole." "Durin! Durin!" said Thorin. "He was the father of the fathers of the eldest race of dwarves, the Longbeards, and my first ancestor. I am his heir." "Then what is Durin's day?" said Elrond. "The first day of the dwarves' new year," said Thorin, "is, as all should know, the first day of the last moon of autumn on the threshold of winter. We still call it Durin's Day, when the last moon of autumn and the sun are in the sky together. But this will not help us much, I fear, for it passes our skill in these days to guess when such a time will come again." "That remains to be seen," said Gandalf. "Is there any more writing?" "None to be seen by this moon," said Elrond, and he gave the map back to Thorin, and then they went down to the water to see the elves dance and sing upon the midsummer's eve. The next morning was a midsummer's morning as fair and fresh as could be dreamed. Blue sky and never a cloud, and the sun dancing on the water. Now they rode away amid songs of farewell and good speed, with their hearts ready for more adventure, and with a knowledge of the road they must follow over the misty mountains to the land beyond. Thank you for listening. That does bring us to the end of Chapter 3 of J.R.R. Tolkien's The Hobbit. I hope you enjoyed that, Fox fans, Tolkienites, and story lovers. How are we doing in the chat? I will just refresh myself a little. Any new faces popping in? We've had Svetlana showing some thumbs up. Shubham, hello to you both. And Sartre Bookworm. Oh, 2 bookworms in the chat. You must be related. Did anybody else pop in and say hello? I don't think so. Oh, speak of the devil, Crystaluna has just entered as well. Nice to see you. Yeah, the chat has been rather quiet. I generally take that as a good thing, that you're just enjoying listening. Really hope you enjoyed it. It is a short one, yeah. And like I said, it's a much calmer one as well. Like the troll chapter is pretty intense. I absolutely love chapter 2. It's a wonderful one. I mean, the first one sets the scene so brilliantly. And for those of you that are perhaps not so familiar with The Hobbit as a book as opposed to a film, you really see how different Tolkien's style is with The Hobbit versus The Lord of the Rings. Of course, published first, written before, and there are people out there that know much, much more about Tolkien's writing process. He was working on so many things, and of course spending an incredible amount of time building the world and all these sub-stories that later became the Silmarillion and other basically unpublished works that were compiled. And I believe that he had his doubts at different times on whether The Lord of the Rings would really work. And like I said, there are people that know much more about this than myself, but it's interesting. I know that The Hobbit is often seen as more of a children's book, and The Lord of the Rings as adult fiction, adult fantasy, but it feels like there's much more to it than simply one is being presented as more child friendly or as a young adult book, and that The Lord of the Rings is purely just aimed at a more mature audience. He just approaches storytelling very differently, and they're both very nice in different ways. And I actually find it harder to read The Hobbit now than I did when I was first sitting and practicing narrating those chapters a few years ago. Even though I've had so much more experience, of course, than at that time, but I don't know. I'm so warmed up to Tolkien's writing for The Lord of the Rings and his presentation of the story, that this very short-handed style with The Hobbit throws me. I'm almost expecting longer, deeper paragraphs and more exposition and more background, deeper description, longer flowing sentences and thicker dialogue. And it's really interesting, I think, in that section where the narrator, who is technically Bilbo writing the Red Book, he really intentionally cuts over certain things that Tolkien would definitely have focused more on if it was in The Lord of the Rings. So if you look at Many Meetings, for instance, chapter 1 of book 2 of The Lord of the Rings, I know I've got quite a slow presentation, so it doesn't necessarily need to be as long a chapter as I present it. But that first chapter is around an hour long, and there's a lot of detail regarding the guests, the room, the food, the atmosphere, the sounds. So this is all based in Rivendell, the same place as we've just entered very briefly in The Hobbit. But in The Hobbit, we just have just a few lines, and he even comments himself like, yeah, hard, difficult stories sort of make better telling than these cozy, pleasant times. And I wish I had more time to focus on these nice, pleasant things, but we'll just smush over there, get to the juicy details. We're introduced to Elrond remarkably briefly. I mean, Elrond is such a huge character. Like, if I think of Middle Earth, The Lord of the Rings, Tolkien as a writer, Elrond is one of the first characters that pops into my mind. But The Hobbit, pretty much the first that we as a reader have seen into this world. We're just told that this is a man of great significance, seemingly with both elven ancestry and this legendary men of the North ancestry combined. Incredibly important, obviously being involved in endless stories through endless ages of this world. But he's not focused on in the story. But this is also really, really fascinating, I think. That Tolkien just has such incredible depth to his writing and to his world that he can touch. He can just name a place, just name a character. He can write out just a couple of lines concerning a particular thing or place or event, and you can just feel the depth that lies behind that. It doesn't feel like an author that is just dropping names and places to sort of give the semblance of depth and history. It feels like you're dipping into one chapter of an encyclopedia, and that one chapter would be the whole of The Hobbit, you know? It's just like a little summary of events for entertainment, really. And that you know that if you were to just pause for a second and say, whoa, hang on a second. Rivendell, the last homely house. Let's go to the full chapter that concerns Rivendell, and we flick across, and there's a section half as thick as The Hobbit just on Rivendell, and it's many occupants that come and go over the ages, and that would link you to 50 other characters that have affected goodness gracious what throughout that history, past and present. It's just absolutely incredible. And when you read The Lord of the Rings, especially when you spend so much time with it as a narrator does, I appreciate it, and appreciate Tolkien's work. I think just more and more. Every chapter I produce, you know, even though I've read these books many years ago, it's just so different, getting so close to the writing, and I feel that I will continue to appreciate these works more and more for many, many years to come. And I ran a poll on my channel just a couple of weeks ago, asking if you would be interested in me reading the Silmarillion at some point, or perhaps the appendices of Return of the King and Lord of the Rings, or whether there are particular other stories by Tolkien that you're interested in. And people have mentioned some of these aspects many, 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 many times, but I just thought it'd be nice to get it down in writing, so to speak. And nearly 1,000 of you have voted, which is really fantastic. And the Silmarillion dominated the vote with, I think, over 50%, saying that you would be most interested in that. Because I was also mentioning The Hobbit as well, that I could do a remake of The Hobbit as a polished audiobook. But Silmarillion topped the poll. So if I manage, as I intend to finish all 6 books of the Lord of the Rings, and do move on either during, if I take a break from Lord of the Rings at some point, but whether during my production of Lord of the Rings or after, if I move on to some of the chapters of the Silmarillion, I'm sure that this love and appreciation of and knowledge of really of Tolkien's world and Middle Earth and everything else, Arda and everything else will continue to increase. And Mango, I think, was mentioned. Was it Mango? I think you were mentioning Men of the West. Great YouTube channel. Where did you mention it? I guess. There. Men of the North. I think it's. Is it not called Men of the West? But you're talking about a website. I'm thinking of the YouTube channel Men of the West, as in Dunedain, Aragorn's ancestry and everything. But yeah, great YouTube channel, going into incredible detail. So much research done there, and you can learn about almost any character you can think of, and there's so many questions posed. What was Aragorn doing before the Lord of the Rings? Maybe like, who is Sauron? Like, where did Sauron come from? And these kind of things. Really fantastic. There's another channel similar. What's it called? Is it called like the history of? Is it called the history of Middle Earth or something like that? Very good as well. I think one is done by a couple of British people, and Men of the West, I think, is a couple of Americans, I think. But good channels, and if there's anything you want to find out about Tolkien, and of course you can. There's some excellent websites out there. I use a few for reference here and there, whether it's pronunciation or a little bit of extra context behind a certain character that's coming into things, or whatever, just for fun. But YouTube channels can just make things arguably more accessible maybe than pages and pages and pages of a website, unless there's you're just in the mood maybe to browse around. And to be fair, those couple of websites that I'm thinking of, they have very good search engines as well. So both useful, just different forms of media. History of Middle Earth. Yeah. Not sure what I said, but that sounds right, Shannon. Thank you. Both really good channels, and there's other ones out there. Don't get me wrong, but someone was mentioning quite recently in the comments. I think it was Connor, if I remember rightly, who was saying that I should get in contact with one of those. I think Men of the West was his favorite among them, and saying that I should collaborate with them in some way, like do some voice acting for them or something. But it's a nice idea. I was thinking of contacting them just for fun and saying hello. And I contacted another YouTuber today, and they replied to me. So, we'll see if anything can come of those kind of things. I've been a bit insular for a long time. I'd been doing some work for a few authors through Audible, and looking for sort of, I call it professional work in various places, and doing little bits of things here and there. And I do have a couple of things sort of on the back burner. There's things that I've been talking about a few weeks ago and stuff. But I've been looking for some good opportunities to collaborate, either with other voice actors and narrators and audiobook producers, or with other channels and things like that. So if you have any recommendations or any contacts or anything like that, please feel free to suggest those. And Bluefax, who was in the chat, I was mentioning his channel, and he does an absolutely wonderful theatrical, dramatic production of The Hobbit. So do check out his channel. And we've been chatting a little bit, along with a couple of other YouTube, I don't want to call them YouTube narrators, it sounds a bit silly, but narrators. So yeah, who knows if we will be able to figure out what to put together at some point. So yeah, I've been a little bit solitary over this last year, really, apart from just little things here and there. But I think that can be good as well. I mean, losing my redfoxvoice channel last June was a real kick in the teeth, and it takes a long time to rebuild. And it's disheartening for a number of reasons, of course. And yeah, and I've been moving house a couple of times, to say the least. Again, recently, there's been some other things, just in my personal life and things, So it's good to just focus in on yourself. And I've been worried about committing to something and feeling that I can't do myself justice, or maybe letting someone down, or committing to the wrong thing, if you know what I mean. You can put a lot of time and effort and creative energy and love into a project and maybe not get as much out of it as it feels like you've put into it, So I feel like I'm wanting to be a little bit more selective with the projects that I work on. Booktuber. Oh, and hello to Ms. or Miss. Are they Chinese characters? I wish I could pronounce the rest of it. I'm not able to. But welcome to Miss popping in. And yes, I'm still very much in Sweden, Mango. We've just moved about 50 kilometers north from where we were previously. Oh, thank you very much, Miss. It's very kind. And I just saw a funny comment from Alex. You were saying that you like my dramatic pronunciation of the Two Towers. I've got to say, I was happy with that little intro for the Two Towers. And I don't know how I'm going to say... the Return of the King just yet. The Return of the King. But I need the music. You need the whole the whole package to get in the mood. When recording that little intro for the Two Towers, I had the music blaring in my ears and tried to lay the text in time with where I was going to edit it into the music. And yeah, I was happy with the Two Towers intro. I think it's much... I don't think my intro for the Lord of the Rings Fellowship of the Ring Book 1 has aged very well. It's fine. But I originally released that as individual chapter videos, like I'm doing with the Two Towers and with Book 2, and then I stuck it all together, and I did give that a re-edit when I lost redfoxvoice before uploading it, but I was a little bit hasty with that re-edit. I was very eager to get good content up onto this channel, onto what was the new channel a year ago. And so I feel like I could have been more thorough and maybe re-recorded the intro and just added a little bit of polish. But to be fair, I wasn't expecting it to get 650,000 views. I mean, it had done absolutely fine on my old channel. But like I said, Harry Potter and other things had taken a lot of my time and focus, and Lord of the Rings was something that I used to record very sporadically. I just recorded one chapter a month, and there was like a 3-month gap at one point. And, so those chapters, I mean, originally they were recorded with an old microphone. I was very new to editing at the time. So I felt like when I was re-editing, I don't even really want to call it a remaster, but like re-editing for this channel, I felt, yes, there was more I could do to present that a little sharper and maybe improve the audio here and there. But just because my production of The Lord of the Rings did start out on a more casual basis, I felt like, okay, I could put a lot of time into that, and it's not really gonna change it so much. Maybe I should just focus on new content. So I'll get that audiobook up onto this channel, and I just need to get working on some nice new juicy content. So I absolutely did have plans to start book 2 of Lord of the Rings, and that had got delayed. But I'd been working on various different things, and I was enjoying the Chronicles of Narnia at the time, for example, and I felt like I really just needed something fresh that I could read in this sort of raw reading style that I'd done with The Secret Garden, quite casual, but immersive, and let the listener hear the turning of the pages and everything. And that was Dracula, and it was running up to Halloween last year, and I just felt, yeah, that's really appropriate. So I got into Dracula, and then when I felt warmed up, I was moving house, blah, 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 but I'd got settled in, had a decent recording space in my, I'll just call it my old apartment, as I've moved again since then. But like last September, did a couple of streams. I did some live reading of The Lord of the Rings, and I felt warmed up enough eventually to get into book 2. Moved house, not this place, my old place, and all the disruption and other things going on again. I was like, okay, I need to just really commit to The Lord of the Rings. Like, if I'm going to do a good job of this, I need to give it some serious time. And that's what I ended up doing. So I was still chipping away at Dracula and a couple of other things, and we're having a couple of live streams over Christmas and things. We had a Christmas Carol and little bits and bobs. But I just thought, okay, I'm just going to try and lock myself away as much as possible and just really focusing on The Lord of the Rings and try and do it justice. So, I was happy with book 1. But it was sort of a production of its time. You're always hopefully improving and evolving, and I feel that book 1, each chapter works in its own way. There's a lot I would change, particularly in the first couple of chapters, but I feel like that some of the chapters, like, they feel a bit more like mini short stories in their own right. Like, they've sometimes got a little bit of a different feel to each other, which is fine. But that was mainly because there were gaps in between my recording, and I was experimenting with different things. I was spending so much time on Harry Potter at the time, so I was, I think, influenced by how I was recording Harry Potter and all sorts of things. As when I just really sat down and week on week produced those 10 chapters of Fellowship of the Ring Book 2, I felt that it came together in a much more unified, smooth way. So that's not to mean that everybody will like how I interpreted it, or like my presentation or pacing or whatever. But I feel that if you go into chapter 1, or you go into chapter 5, or you go into chapter 9, the presentation is much more consistent. It's smooth. It feels like it's all part of the same product. The audio quality is very consistent, and the editing is very similar. And of course, depending on the scene, depending on the chapter, there's drama, there's calm, there's suspense, there's all the moods in there. So it's not like every chapter has the exact same feel, of course, but it feels like a much more complete piece. And that's what I'm very much endeavouring to do with The Two Towers as well. And I'm trying to just up the ante a little bit with the voice acting aspect. Because voice acting in Lord of the Rings is tough. It is tough. I mean, voice acting for any book, or I'm sure for games and TV and everything, like animations or whatever, is always very tricky. And whether you've just got a few lines or 5-page monologues, it's difficult in different ways. But when starting The Lord of the Rings, I was not used to... If you think of Chapter 2 of Lord of the Rings Book 1, these huge monologues from Gandalf, primarily. And that was really intimidating. So I'd been putting a lot of focus on Harry Potter at the time. There was loads of other things that I was working on as well, and lots through live streams and things. But it was like Harry Potter, I felt really rapidly improved my voice acting, and I do approach the voice acting of characters very differently depending on the book or on the sort of mood that I'm trying to present. But I was used to these shorter, sharper bits of dialogue that you get in Harry Potter, and then and The Hobbit as well, which had warmed me up. You know, much shorter little pieces of dialogue interspersed, and lots of very crazy characters, fantastical creatures, and I love all that kind of stuff. And then you get into The Lord of the Rings, and I mean, you have... Oh, let me think. Must be 5 chapters or so, with much more humanoid, regular characters. Nothing too fantastical, apart from maybe just a ringwraith scream here or something that I threw in for fun and for a bit of immersion and to make a few of you jump. But you know, the pace is much slower. It's very thorough and complex, very, very interesting. But it's a slow pace, these long monologues, and I suppose at the time I was just a little bit caught. Okay, so am I just going to focus on sort of like a relaxing reading, a sort of pleasant atmosphere, and you're still hopefully becoming immersed in the story, but it's very, very, very far from a dramatic audiobook, for example. Or do I try and bring as much life as I can into these very long monologues, and with a lot of characters that are quite similar to each other. You know, we've got 4 hobbits of similar age and profile. There's a bunch of other random hobbits and things like that. But it was a intimidating task. It was daunting. And like I said, when some of the characters can be talking at length, it felt quite unnatural and tricky. So, and book 2, it has plenty of that as well. The Council of Elrond, chapter 2, book 2, absolutely crazy chapter for an audiobook producer, one person to look at that. About 25 different characters and voices. Very, very tough. But I felt like I had the experience now. Like I sort of, I felt warmed up. I was like, okay, bring the monologues. We can do this. We can make it fun. We can make it immersive. Let's bring all these different characters to life, introducing some wonderful characters in that chapter. And there's these scenes where characters are telling stories. They're telling anecdotes, presenting anecdotes. So I found that very amusing, like having a Gandalf narrator. There's a Gloin narrator. Yeah, like Legolas is telling stories as well. But like the Gandalf sections where he goes to Orthanc and there's Saruman and he's actually narrating that. So there's like sub-narrators within the narration. And I was intimidated, but I just felt like, yeah, come on, bring it on. But there are still points where I feel like, okay, the voice acting of book 2, it suits that book. It sort of suits the style that I was going for. But with book 3, I just feel like I'm trying to just. I don't know if it's taking it up a notch. I guess it's just trying just a slightly different style. It's still within a very similar format, but just trying to make the voice acting that a little bit more convincing, just a little bit more realistic, a little bit more dramatic, and also, you know, I like a leisurely pace with my narration, but trying to just increase the pace a little bit, just tighten things up a little bit. Just try and make the narration a little smoother. And this is mainly in editing, but sometimes in the pace of my delivery as well. So I really hope you're enjoying The Two Towers, Book 3. It was an absolute pleasure to have so many of you join me for the Treebeard chapter 4 of Book 3 on Sunday evening. It was a wonderful experience, and that some of you sat through the whole 2.5 hour chapter as well was absolutely incredible. I was really impressed, and I just absolutely loved producing that chapter. It was tough, but it was just a pleasure, and it was the same with chapter 3 as well, with the orcs. Very different style of chapter, but absolute pleasure to produce. So much fun, and I'm technically on with chapter 5 as well. I haven't got anything into the mic yet, but I've been pre-reading the chapter and practicing a little bits and just trying to make some choices with how I'm going to present it and stuff. But it'll be good, I'm sure. So yeah, ended up having a little bit of a ramble there, but I know some of you found it genuinely quite interesting to just hear a little bit of the sort of behind the scenes, so to speak. But I will get back to the reading. It's lovely to have you all here. So we're going to crack on. We're going to crack on with The Witches. This is the plan. Yeah, it's a good point that, though, what you're saying, Alex. You're saying everybody starts off Lord of the Rings in a relaxed way. I mean, I won't go into another big chat about Lord of the Rings. We'll try and move things on. But Book 1 and Book 2 and Book 3, and of course it continues, they do have a very different feel to each other. So a bit of a different style for each book does make sense. And that's why I wanted to have different music introducing each book as well, you know. Setting a different tone. But I still, if I was to go back, like I said, I think I would at least redo chapter 1 and chapter 2 of book 1, It's not that I'm like dreadfully unhappy with it or anything, but I recorded chapter 1 not only on an old microphone with less knowledge of editing and all the rest of it, but I mean it was what, like oh gosh, what month did I do that now? I mean, it must be, is it like 2.5 years ago? Can it be that? Can it be that long ago? Time really does fly. Yeah, it must be. Yeah, it must be. Yeah, it must be like over. Yeah, it must be like 2.5 years ago since I recorded chapter 1 and that prologue of Lord of the Rings. So it's hardly surprising that I feel there's a lot I would change. But there's some scenes in book 1 that I'm proud of. But when I get some comments that I get some really wonderful comments on book 1, and I'm very, very thankful for that. But I do get some harsh ones as well. And I just negative comments, they hurt, of course, especially when some people are very clumsy and rude. But I try to tell myself as well, it's like, okay, but I did record this a couple of years ago. I'm not the same audiobook producer now than I was then. And then someone comes and says your new chapter's a load of crap, and you're like, okay, well, thanks. But I try my best with everything I do. I'm always sort of like 100% or nothing. And I always put, it sounds cheesy, but I always put my heart and soul into everything I do. A lot of love and creative energy and everything. And at the same time, I'm always trying to keep a sort of tempo to my productions for YouTube and Patreon and everything as well. I don't want to spend 3 months on one chapter, even if I feel like I could do a better job than if I spend 2-3 weeks on a chapter, or 1 week on a chapter, depending what book it's for, or leave it, or read the chapter live in just an hour or something, but there might be a day that comes where I feel I can justify spending considerably longer on one particular book or on one particular chapter, but that time has not yet come. But so many of you seem to enjoy what I do, whether it's a live reading, whether it's a raw reading, whether it's more of a professional audiobook style or whatever. So I'm very, very grateful for that. And as Mango says, you can't please everybody. But at the end of the day, I feel like you need to at least please yourself. I'm sure it's a classic thing a classic bit of advice to give yourself. But I really believe that you need to be happy with what you produce. Maybe that sounds obvious. But you really, really need to be self-critical as well, and not get too lost in some little echo chamber, in some like little bubble. But I feel that like when you've this is why I like to set myself a deadline for, so say like, okay, by this Friday or this Sunday I will finish this chapter, whether that's in 5 days time, a week, 2 weeks, whatever, it doesn't matter. But like, I do have these sort of perfectionist tendencies, and I know I can always do more, and I probably spend arguably too much time on certain things. But I feel that at that moment when you say, okay, enough is enough, I'm exporting that audio, I'm uploading that video, whatever, that the product is finished for that moment, you can come back to it, you can do another version, you can remaster it or whatever, you can change things at a later date. But like at that moment when you're sort of submitting it wherever it's going, if you're if you're happy, if you can like sit by that and say, you know, you've got the headphones on in my case, and I'm there like listening back to it that last time, and if you go, that's pretty good, I'm happy with that, click, then that's the most important thing. And of course, you're always going to have hindsight. You can always look back. You can criticize. You can think, oh yeah, maybe I should have done this differently, or there's something I would have improved, or there's new ideas or skills that you've formed over the time that's passed, or whatever. And you know, some of your constructive criticism can be really, really, really helpful as well. And at the time, I might kind of think, oh well, you know, it's a bit late now, or no, I don't think that would work here. But maybe some weeks down the line, or months down the line, that might help me with approaching something a little bit differently, or trying a new idea, or whatever. And sometimes, you know, when I have like these polls on Patreon, or like some questions that I present on Patreon or something, and you were helping me with what music to use out of a short list of pieces for book 3 of Lord of the Rings, and you were giving me some feedback on the song in chapter 1 of book 3, and those things are really, really, really useful. Like, I try not to do that too much, you know. I feel like I need to trust myself and go with my instincts a lot of the time. And it can get a little bit confusing if you're getting conflicting opinions from all over the place. Sometimes you do need to, I think, like put your Magneto hat on and just be kind of like, all right, I'm just I don't need to listen to Professor X right now. I'm just gonna trust myself, you know, and click that button, and I'm happy with it, you know, like follow your own style. That's what I did with the elves of Lorien, like the wood elves and everything. You know, I was like, if I put this out to you guys, or even if I didn't ask anybody about it. I was just like, all right, I want them to sound sort of like this. I'm gonna give this a go. I know some people are gonna hate it. I think some people like it. I think some people might warm to it in time, especially when they sort of see where I'm coming from with it. Slow burner, and I just went for it, you know. And then sometimes I feel like, no, but let's see what they think over on Discord, and you know, let's get a bit of feedback if I can. And or like I said, sometimes it's just from the comment sections on YouTube, and you know, it gets you thinking about a certain thing. Oh, okay, yeah, maybe I could try this and stuff. You know, it's great. All right. All right. Enough chat. But I've missed the live streams. I've missed the book clubs and hanging out with you and everything. It's really, really nice. So we've had lots of chat. Let's have a bit more reading. Yeah, I mean, sometimes you've got to get yourself out of your comfort zone, Olivia, as well, and you know, push yourself in different directions and try different things. And you know, if you were just to lock yourself in a white room, never listen to anything else, never come out of it, you could get lucky and still come out with a masterpiece, but equally, it might not be the best way to evolve. You know, sometimes you've got to, you know, yeah, I don't know. You get the point. Let me just have a sip of water, and then I'm gonna jump in, and I will change the writing. Although I forgot to change it from coming up to now reading. Never mind. I'll blame the power cut. Interesting, Alex. Is a Tolkien joke. Okay, I'll look into this. I'll look into this. I was looking at just trying to make sure, because I was much less thorough with correct pronunciations of Tolkien's fantasy when I was first starting, because it was mainly because I just felt like I was going to get absolutely overwhelmed. Like if I was, because sometimes it's quite difficult to actually figure out exactly how you pronounce something or exactly how he heard something. So at first I was winging it a little bit. Like there were certain things I would look up, the certain things I was just trying to remember from what I'd heard in the film, or just trust my own reading from when I was a kid and stuff, or whatever. But now I try to sort of check the Tolkien dictionary. I wish there was just like such a comprehensive thing. I could just click a button and it was Tolkien's voice like reading out Elrond. Like you could just click the button and it's there. But I try to make sure I'm pronouncing things as close as I can. And I was looking up some things to do with the Rohirrim and everything, and looking into like the parallels with Old Saxon languages and such. Yeah, you're talking about like Old English. That's where I was going with the Germanic and Saxon. Yeah, right. Okay, yeah, I'll look into that a bit more, Alex. Thanks for the heads up. Oh, and hello to Barbara as well. Oh, hi Jordan. It's because the Fellowship is multiple books. If you get yourself a physical copy of the Lord of the Rings, or if you just go onto Wikipedia or one of these really good Tolkien websites or whatever, you will quickly see that the Lord of the Rings, it's split into 3 volumes, and each volume includes 2 books, so there's 6 books total. So it's Fellowship of the Ring, Book 1, Book 2, Two Towers, Book 3, Book 4, and The Return of the King, Book 5, Book 6. So it's nothing to do with me. It's not my decision or anything. That's just how it's written. So it's 12 chapters, 10 more chapters, so it's 22 chapters split into 2 books for the Fellowship of the Ring, and then it's 11 chapters for Book 3, and etc. It's a big piece. It's a big piece of work. But a lot of people get confused with that, John. It's not just you, believe me. I get asked this question almost like every week. Someone in the comments will say like, what's going on? Why is Book 2 Fellowship of the Ring? I thought that was Two Towers. Or someone will say like, you've labelled it wrong and things like that. It's just how it was. It's just how it was written. It's just how he presented it. So yeah, don't you worry about it, Jordan. It's a very, very, very common issue. Oh, that's interesting, Alex. Nice. I think I would have appreciated that. I started medieval history as a sort of a minor when I first started university at the University of St Andrews. So I was doing geography, geoscience, and medieval history. But I ended up just focusing on geography. But always been very interested in history. I'm not much of a linguist. I mean, I did well at school in English and English language and English literature or whatever, but foreign language, so to speak, modern languages, I think, as they used to often call it, not a strength of mine. But I feel like when it has this historical edge, I would have found that very interesting. Oh yeah, it's a massive process, Mango. Like, it all depends on how you want to do it. Like sometimes for the live streams, I've chosen something I want to read. I probably know a little bit about the book. It depends on the book, and I just open it up for the first time and read it live to you. And that's literally the first time I've ever read it. And then sometimes I've pre-read it. I've maybe read it just in my head. Maybe I've read it out aloud. Maybe I've practiced certain characters. Maybe I've done a bit of research into the context of that chapter. Maybe I've read more of the book. Maybe I've read the whole book at some point. Or you can go all the way to the other end where you have thoroughly read what's coming, prepared it, practiced different things, and done maybe 5, 10, 20 takes of a particular line or paragraph or single line of character dialogue or whatever, and then you've thoroughly edited it in various different ways. So yeah, it's a huge process. It can be quite simple, but obviously live reading, as you said, a cold read as well, like live reading something you've never read before, like sight reading music basically, is pretty tricky, if I may say so. So if I do a half decent job of like a live cold read, I can sometimes be cringing a little bit in my head, like I hear these mistakes and it's like, oh, it was supposed to sound a little bit more like that, or I should have done it like this, and and you know there's no editing involved or anything, but I try and just like pat myself on the back and be like, look, that's tricky. It's not easy to read aloud live and actually not make many mistakes and try and bring this piece to life. But it's going to be a very different product to a very like polished, edited audiobook. And especially if you go about things the way that Bluefax does, for example. And he's been really inspired by Phil Dragash, who has produced one of the most popular and loved fan production or like amateur unofficial productions, far more professional than many professional audiobook, so-called professional audiobooks of the Lord of the Rings. So Bluefax has produced The Hobbit in a similar style that Phil Dragash produced the Lord of the Rings, and I mean that is an absolutely enormous process. Absolutely incredible. So when we've got all this dramatic music and sounds and the layering of all sorts of different audio, it needs to be so tightly done. And for my finished chapters, like that Treebeard chapter, for example, to sound the way it sounds takes a lot of work. And then when you add all these other elements as well, it's a huge job. Yeah. Cheers, Alex. I'm literally gonna get started now. I said I won't go into more chat, and I ended up going into more chat anyway. I mean, to be fair, I didn't quite go into the chat that I said I wouldn't go into, but I went into other chat. So, never mind. Okay. Officially Witcher's time. I'm changing the text. I'm not answering any more questions. To be fair, most of the questions are just things in my own brain, I think, but so like I said, I didn't change coming up to now reading, but never mind. I think we've figured it out. So this will be the witches. And what did I say? Was it 15, 16, and 17? I think. Do I risk it? I think my memory serves me rightly. If anybody can check, or I can check in a second. I just have to budge this over a little bit. Hard to do without a mouse. Because my laptop, if you see me struggling like this, it's not that absolutely hopeless. It's because my laptop only has 2 USB ports. So the webcam is in one, the microphone and its whole system is in the other. So I have to just use the little trackpad on my laptop. So it makes these sort of little fine movements. It's a small screen as well. Like it makes it quite tricky. Like if I had a big screen and a mouse, it would be much easier. Get my chat back. It does say in the video description, to be fair. I'm not just asking you to like psychically know which channel, which chapter was next, but and it does say in the last thumbnail as well for the witches, but I'll double check it. Don't worry. You just sit there. You just relax. It's all right. I'll fix it. I'll fix it. Don't worry. It's all right. I've got you. So yeah, 12, 13, and 14 was last time, which means 15, 16, and 17 is this time. You actually do keep notes. I'm impressed. Oh, and hello to Emma. I'm from Yorkshire, up north. So Sheffield is sort of my closest city back home, but I live in Sweden. Right. So yeah, 15, 16, 17 this time, and then next time will be the last part of the witches, and it'll be a 4-part special: 18, 19, 20, and 21. And I've already like basically finished a complete audiobook sort of thing for the witches. It's just waiting for these last 7 chapters to cut in, and I've got the video from the live streams. Like I've cut it out and everything, and got it all lined up. And you can see what chapter we're listening to. There's like little transitions on the video and everything. So that will be coming to the channel as well. So once I get these last 2 witches readings done, then there will be sort of I'm saying like sort of a complete audiobook, because it will be broken up with like little bits of chat from the live stream, and that is an intentional thing as well. I'm always a little bit worried about videos getting taken down and things like that, but I feel that fair use is arguably justified, when maybe, I guess, like altogether, you know, maybe like a good 30% of the video will be live stream, and there's my own video there and everything. So hopefully there won't be any problems when I do finish and publish that complete video of the witches with all the chapters stuck together. It is a funny film. Emma. Like I know some people are a fan, but I totally understand why you think it was creepy, for sure. Faux shizzle. Okay. Sorry for the wait, Fox fans. You've been very patient, or generally very patient, waiting so loyally, been so well behaved for Roald Dahl's The Witches. And to be fair, you've not only been patiently waiting today, but some of you have been semi-patiently waiting for many weeks, as we have had a break in the live streams with me moving house and everything. So, I hope we're ready. Chapter 15. The Mouse-Burglar. My grandmother hustled me back into my own bedroom and out onto the balcony. "Are you ready?" she asked. "I'm going to put you in the sock now." "I hope I can manage this," I said. "I'm only a little mouse." "You'll manage," she said. "Good luck, my darling." She popped me into the sock and started lowering me over the balcony. I crouched inside the sock and held my breath. Through the stitches I could see out quite clearly. Miles below me, the children playing on the beach were the size of beetles. The sock started swinging in the breeze. I looked up and saw my grandmother's head sticking out over the railings of the balcony above. "You're nearly there," she called out. "Here we go. Gently does it. You're down." I felt a slight bump. "In you go," my grandmother was shouting. "Hurry, hurry, hurry! Search the room!" I jumped out of the sock and ran into the Grand High Witch's bedroom. There was the same musty smell about the place that I had noticed in the ballroom. It was the stench of witches. It reminded me of the smell inside the men's public lavatory at our local railway station. As far as I could see, the room was tidy enough. There was no sign anywhere that it was inhabited by anyone but an ordinary person. But then there wouldn't be, would there? No witch would be stupid enough to leave anything suspicious lying around for the hotel maid to see. Suddenly I saw a frog jumping across the carpet and disappearing under the bed. I jumped myself. "Hurry up!" came my grandmother's voice from somewhere high up outside. "Grab the stuff and get out!" I started skittering round and trying to search the room. This wasn't so easy. I couldn't, for example, open any of the drawers. I couldn't open the doors of the big wardrobe either. I stopped skittering about. I sat in the middle of the floor and had a think. If the Grand High Witch wanted to hide something top secret, where would she put it? Certainly not in any of the ordinary drawers. Not in the wardrobe either. It was too obvious. I jumped up onto the bed to get a better view of the room. Hey, I thought, what about under the mattress? Very carefully, I lowered myself over the edge of the bed and wormed my way underneath the mattress. I had to push forward hard to make any headway, but I kept at it. I couldn't see a thing. I was scrambling about under the mattress when my head suddenly bumped against something hard inside the mattress above me. I reached up and felt it with my paw. Could it be a little bottle? It was a little bottle. I could trace the shape of it through the cloth of the mattress. And right alongside it, I felt another hard lump, and another, and another. The Grand High Witch must have slit open the mattress and put all the bottles inside and then sewn it all up again. I began tearing away frantically at the mattress cloth above my head with my teeth. My front teeth were extremely sharp, and it didn't take me long to make a small hole. I climbed into the hole and grabbed a bottle by the neck. I pushed it down through the hole in the mattress and climbed out after it. Walking backwards and dragging the bottle behind me, I managed to reach the edge of the mattress. I rolled the bottle off the bed onto the carpet. It bounced, but it didn't break. I jumped down off the bed. I examined the little bottle. It was identical to the one the Grand High Witch had had in the ballroom. There was a label on this one. Formula 86, it said. Delayed action mouse maker. Then it said, this bottle contains 500 doses. Eureka! I felt tremendously pleased with myself. 3 frogs came hopping out from under the bed. They crouched on the carpet, staring at me with large black eyes. I stared back at them. Those huge eyes were the saddest things I'd ever seen. It suddenly occurred to me that almost certainly once upon a time they had been children, those frogs, before the Grand High Witch had got hold of them. I stood there clutching the bottle and staring at the frogs. Who are you? I asked them. At that exact moment, I heard a key turning in the lock of the door, and the door burst open, and the Grand High Witch swept into the room. The frogs jumped underneath the bed again in one quick hop. I darted after them, still clutching the bottle, and I ran back against the wall and squeezed in behind one of the bedposts. I heard feet walking on the carpet. I peeped round the bedpost. The 3 frogs were clustered together under the middle of the bed. Frogs cannot hide like mice. They cannot run like mice either. All they can do, poor things, is to hop about rather clumsily. Suddenly, the Grand High Witch's face came into view, peering under the bed. I popped my head back behind the bedpost. So there you are, my little froggies, I heard her saying. You can stay where you are until I go to bed tonight. Then I shall throw you out of the window and the seagulls can have you for supper. Suddenly, very loud and clear, there came the sound of my grandmother's voice through the open balcony door. "Hurry up, my darling," it shouted. "Do hurry up. You'd better come out quickly." "Who is calling?" snapped the Grand High Witch. I peeped round the bedpost again and saw her walking across the carpet to the balcony door. "Who is this on my balcony?" she muttered. "Who is it? Who dares to trespass on my balcony?" She went through the door onto the balcony itself. "What is this knitting wool hanging down here?" I heard her saying. "Oh, hello," came my grandmother's voice. "I just dropped my knitting over the balcony by mistake, but it's all right. I've got hold of one end of it. I can pull it up by myself. Thank you all the same." I marvelled at the coolness of her voice. "Who were you talking to just now?" snapped the Grand High Witch. "Who were you telling to hurry up and come out quickly?" "I was talking to my little grandson," I heard my grandmother saying. "He's been in the bathroom for hours, and it's time he came out. He sits in there reading books, and he forgets completely where he is. Do you have any children, my dear?" "I do not," shouted the Grand High Witch, and she came back quickly into the bedroom, slamming the balcony door behind her. I was cooked. My escape route was closed. I was shut up in the room with the Grand High Witch and 3 terrified frogs. I was just as terrified as the frogs. I was quite sure that if I was spotted, I would be caught and thrown out over the balcony for the seagulls. There came a knock on the bedroom door.
"What is it this time?"
shouted the Grand High Witch.
"It is we, ancient ones,"
said a meek voice from behind the door.
"It is 6 o'clock, and we have come to collect the bottles that you promised us. Oh, hi, grandness."
I saw her crossing the carpet towards the door. The door was opened, and then I saw a whole lot of feet and shoes beginning to enter the room. They were coming in slowly and hesitantly, as though the owners of those shoes were frightened of entering.
Come in,
snapped the Grand High Witch.
"Do not stand out there dithering in the corridor. I don't have all night."
I saw my chance. I jumped out from behind the bedpost and ran like lightning towards the open door. I jumped over several pairs of shoes on the way, and in 3 seconds, I was out in the corridor, still clutching the precious bottle to my chest. No one had seen me. There were no shouts of "Mouse, mouse!" All I could hear were the voices of the ancient witches burbling their silly sentences about
"How kind your grandness is,"
and all the rest of it. I went scampering down the corridor to the stairs and up one flight. I went to the 5th floor and then along the corridor again until I came to the door of my own bedroom. Thank goodness there was no one in sight. Using the bottom of the little bottle, I began tapping on the door. Tap, 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 tap. I went. Tap, tap, tap. Tap, tap, tap. Would my grandmother hear me? I thought she must. The bottle made quite a loud tap each time it struck. Tap, tap, tap. Tap, tap, tap. Just so long as nobody came along the corridor. But the door didn't open. I decided to take a risk. "Grandmama!" I shouted as loudly as I possibly could. "Grandmama! It's me! Let me in!" I heard her feet come across the carpet and the door opened. I went in like an arrow. "I've done it!" I cried, jumping up and down. "I've got it, Grandmama! Look, here it is! I've got a whole bottle of it!" She closed the door. She bent down and picked me up and hugged me. "Oh, my darling," she cried. "Thank heavens you're safe." She took the little bottle from me and read the label aloud. "Formula 86 Delayed Action Mouse Maker," she read. "This bottle contains 500 doses. You brilliant darling boy. You're a wonder. You're a marvel. How on earth did you get out of her room?" "I nipped out when the ancient witches were coming in," I told her. "It was all a bit hairy, Grandmama. I wouldn't want to do it again." "I saw her too," my grandmother said. "I know you did, Grandmama. I heard you talking to each other. Didn't you think she was absolutely foul?" "She's a murderer," my grandmother said. "She's the most evil woman in the entire world." "Did you see her mask?" I asked. "It's amazing," my grandmother said. "It looks just like a real face. Even though I knew it was a mask, I still couldn't tell." "Oh, my darling," she cried, giving me a hug. "I thought I'd never see you again. I'm so happy you got away." Chapter 16. Mr. and Mrs. Jenkins meet Bruno. My grandmother carried me back into her own bedroom and put me on the table. She set the precious bottle down beside me. "What time are those witches having supper in the dining room?" she asked. 8 o'clock, I said. She looked at her watch. "It is now 6:10, she said. "We've got until 8 o'clock to work out our next move." Suddenly, her eye fell upon Bruno. He was still in the banana bowl on the table. He'd eaten 3 bananas and was now attacking a 4th. He had become immensely fat. "That's quite enough," my grandmother said, lifting him out of the bowl and putting him on the tabletop. "I think it's time we returned this little fellow to the bosom of his family. Don't you agree, Bruno?" Bruno scowled at her. I'd never seen a mouse scowl before, but he managed it.
"My parents let me eat as much as I want," he said. "I'd rather be with them than with you."
"Of course you would," my grandmother said. "Do you know where your parents might be at this moment?"
"They were in the lounge not long ago."
"Oh. They were in the lounge not long ago," I said. "I saw them sitting there as we dashed through on our way up here." "Right," my grandmother said. "Let's go and see if they're still there. Do you want to come along?" she added, looking at me. "Yes, please," I said. "I shall put you both in my handbag," she said. "Keep quiet and stay out of sight. If you must peep out now and again, don't show more than your nose." Her handbag was a large, bulgy, black leather affair with a tortoise-shell clasp. She picked up Bruno and me and popped us into it. "I shall leave the clasp undone," she said. "But be sure to keep out of sight." I had no intention of keeping out of sight. I wanted to see everything. I seated myself in a little side pocket inside the bag, near the clasp, and from there I was able to poke my head out whenever I wanted to.
"Hey!"
Bruno called out.
"Give me the rest of that banana I was eating."
"Oh, all right," my grandmother said. "Anything to keep you quiet." She dropped the half-eaten banana into the bag, then slung the bag over her arm and marched out of the room and went thumping along the corridor with her walking stick. We went down in a lift to the ground floor and made our way through the reading room to the lounge. And there, sure enough, sat Mr. and Mrs. Jenkins in a couple of armchairs with a low, round, glass-covered table between them. There were several other groups in there as well, but the Jenkinses were the only couple sitting alone. Mr. Jenkins was reading a newspaper. Mrs. Jenkins was knitting something large and mustard-coloured. Only my nose and eyes were above the clasp of my grandmother's handbag, but I had a super view. I could see everything. My grandmother, dressed in black lace, went thumping across the floor of the lounge and halted in front of the Jenkinses' table. "Are you Mr. and Mrs. Jenkins?" she asked. Mr. Jenkins looked at her over the top of his newspaper and frowned. "Yes," he said. "I am Mr. Jenkins. What can I do for you, madam?" "I'm afraid I have some rather alarming news for you," she said. "It's about your son, Bruno. What about Bruno? Mr. Jenkins said. Mrs. Jenkins looked up, but went on knitting. What's the little blighter been up to now? Mr. Jenkins asked. Raid in the kitchen, I suppose. It's a bit worse than that, my grandmother said. Do you think we might go somewhere more private while I tell you about it? Private? Mr. Jenkins said. Why do we have to be private? This is not an easy thing for me to explain, my grandmother said. I'd much rather we all went up to your room and sat down before I tell you any more. Mr. Jenkins lowered his paper. Mrs. Jenkins stopped knitting. I don't want to go up to my room, madam, Mr. Jenkins said. I'm quite comfortable here, thank you very much. He was a large, coarse man, and he wasn't used to being pushed around by anybody. Kindly state your business and then leave us alone, he added. He spoke as though he was addressing someone who was trying to sell him a vacuum cleaner at the back door. My poor grandmother, who had been doing her best to be as kind to them as possible, now began to bristle a bit herself. We really can't talk in here, she said. There are too many people. This is a rather delicate and personal matter. I'll talk where I dashed well want to, madam, Mr. Jenkins said. Come on now, out with it. If Bruno has broken a window or smashed your spectacles, then I'll pay for the damage, but I'm not budging out of this seat. One or two other groups in the room were beginning to stare at us now. Where is Bruno, anyway? Mr. Jenkins said. Tell him to come here and see me. He's here already, my grandmother said. He's in my handbag. She patted the big floppy leather bag with her walking stick. What the heck do you mean he's in your handbag? Mr. Jenkins shouted.
Are you trying to be funny?
Mrs. Jenkins said, very prim. There's nothing funny about this, my grandmother said. Your son has suffered a rather unfortunate mishap. He's always suffering mishaps, Mr. Jenkins said. He suffers from overeating and then he suffers from wind. You should hear him after supper. He sounds like a brass band. But a good dose of castor oil soon puts him right again. Where is the little beggar? I've already told you, my grandmother said. He's in my handbag. But I do think it might be better if we went somewhere private before you meet him in his present state.
This woman's mad,
Mrs. Jenkins said.
Tell her to go away.
The plain fact is, my grandmother said, that your son Bruno has been rather drastically altered. Altered? Shouted Mr. Jenkins. What the devil do you mean, altered?
Go away,
Mrs. Jenkins said.
You're a silly old woman.
I'm trying to tell you as gently as I possibly can that Bruno really is in my handbag, my grandmother said. My own grandson actually saw them doing it to him. Saw who? Doing what to him, for heaven's sake? Shouted Mr. Jenkins. He had a black moustache which jumped up and down when he shouted. Saw the witches turning him into a mouse, my grandmother said.
Call the manager, dear,
Mrs. Jenkins said to her husband.
Have this madwoman thrown out of the hotel.
At this point, my grandmother's patience came to an end. She fished around in her handbag and found Bruno. She lifted him out and dumped him on the glass-topped table. Mrs. Jenkins took one look at the fat little brown mouse who was still chewing a bit of banana, and she let out a shriek that rattled the crystals on the chandelier. She sprang out of her chair, yelling, "It's a mouse! Take it away! I can't stand the things!" "It's Bruno," my grandmother said. "You nasty cheeky old woman!" shouted Mr. Jenkins. He started flapping his newspaper at Bruno, trying to sweep him off the table. My grandmother rushed forward and managed to grab hold of him before he was swept away. Mrs. Jenkins was still screaming her head off, and Mr. Jenkins was towering over us and shouting, "Get out of here! How dare you throw out of my life like that? Take your filthy mouse away this instant!" "Help!" screamed Mrs. Jenkins. Her face had gone the colour of the underside of a fish. "Well, I did my best," my grandmother said, and with that she turned and sailed out of the room, carrying Bruno with her. Chapter 17. The Plan. When we got back to the bedroom, my grandmother took both me and Bruno out of her handbag and put us on the table. "Why on earth didn't you speak up and tell your father who you were?" she said to Bruno.
"Because I had my mouth full,"
Bruno said. He jumped straight back into the bowl of bananas and went on with his eating. "What a very disagreeable little boy you are," my grandmother said to him. "Not boy," I said. "Mouse." "Quite right, my darling. But we don't have time to worry about him at this moment. We have plans to make. In about an hour and a half's time, all the witches will be going down to supper in the dining room, right?" "Right," I said. "And every one of them has got to be given a dose of Mousemaker," she said. "How on earth are we going to do that?" "Grandmama," I said, "I think you are forgetting that a mouse can go places where human beings can't." "That's quite right," she said. "But even a mouse can't go creeping around on the tabletop carrying a bottle and sprinkling Mousemaker all over the witch's roast beef without being spotted." "I wasn't thinking of doing it in the dining room," I said. "Then where?" she asked. "In the kitchen," I said, "while their food is being got ready." My grandmother stared at me. "My darling child," she said slowly, "I do believe that turning you into a mouse has doubled your brain power." "A little mouse," I said, "can go scuttling round the kitchen among the pots and pans, and if he's very careful, no one will ever see him." "Brilliant!" my grandmother cried out. "By golly, I think you've got it." "The only thing is," I said, "how will I know which food is theirs? I don't want to put it in the wrong saucepan. It would be disastrous if I turned all the other guests into mice by mistake, and especially you, Grandmama. Then you'll just have to creep into the kitchen and find a good hiding place and wait and listen. Just lie there in some dark cranny listening to what the cooks are saying, and then, with a bit of luck, somebody's going to give you a clue. Whenever they have a very big party to cook for, the food is always prepared separately." "Right," I said. "That's what I'll have to do. I shall wait there and I shall listen and I shall hope for a bit of luck. "It's going to be very dangerous," my grandmother said. "Nobody welcomes a mouse in the kitchen. If they see you, they'll squash you to death." "I won't let them see me," I said. "Don't forget you'll be carrying the bottle," she said, "so you won't be nearly so quick and nippy." "I can run quite fast standing up with the bottle in my arms," I said. "I did it just now, don't you remember? I came all the way up from the Grand High Witch's room carrying it." "What about unscrewing the top?" she said. "That might be difficult for you." "Let me try," I said. I took hold of the little bottle, and using both my front paws, I found I was able to unscrew the cap quite easily. "That's great," my grandmother said. "You really are a very clever mouse." She glanced at her watch. "At 7:30, she said, "I shall go down to the dining room for supper with you in my handbag. I shall then release you under the table together with the precious bottle, and from then on, you'll be on your own. You'll have to work your way unseen across the dining room to the door that leads into the kitchen. There will be waiters going in and out of that door all the time. You will have to choose the right moment and nip in behind one of them, but for heaven's sake be sure that you don't get trodden on or squeezed in the door." "I'll try not to," I said. "And whatever happens, you mustn't let them catch you." "Don't go on about it, Grandmamma. You're making me nervous." "You're a brave little fellow," she said. "I do love you." "What shall we do with Bruno?" I asked her. Bruno looked up. "I'm coming with you," he said, speaking with his mouth full of banana. "I'm not going to miss my supper." My grandmother considered this for a moment. "I'll take you along," she said, "if you promise to stay in my bag and keep absolutely silent."
"Will you pass food down to me from the table?"
Bruno asked. "Yes," she said, "if you promise to behave yourself." "Would you like something to eat, my darling?" she said to me. "No, thank you," I said. "I'm too excited to eat. And I've got to keep fit and frisky for the big job ahead." "It's a big job, all right," my grandmother said. "You'll never do a bigger one." That was the end of chapter 17. And I'm going to continue, Fox fans. I am going to continue. Because it took me a little while to get warmed up with The Witches today, with me not reading it for a few weeks. I'd got into a good flow last time, so it didn't take me too long each stream to get into the reading. But I felt a little bit sluggish in that first chapter, The Mouse-Burglar, and it went okay. It went okay. But chapter 2 and chapter 3 of today's stream was much smoother. So I'm going to continue. But I will just get some more water, take a drink, and just have a little stretch, because I've been sat in the same place for... You know, you can stick weeks together into months, Shannon, and it's not been that long. Come on. It's not been that long. But yeah, a couple of months since the last one. April 20th. 3 months. But yeah, I felt a bit rusty with that chapter, so I'd love to keep going after a smoother second and third. And yeah, Where's that? Oh. But yeah, I've been on for. It's like technically 3 hours, but there was all the disconnections, so it's sort of like 2.5 hours. So I'll just take a quick stretch the legs, but yeah, it'll just be a quick one. It'll just be a quick one, so don't go anywhere. Yeah, I'm gonna try and go all the way to the end today. This was my original plan, but I didn't want to promise 7 chapters if I felt like I couldn't handle 7 chapters, or if it just didn't work. You know, as I don't live by myself, you've got to respect these things. But that was my original plan. Like, I was actually gonna call this stream a witches marathon and say that I was going to have all 7 chapters today and finish it up. But with me not streaming for a little while, it takes some getting back into it. There's not just all the setup and stuff, but you know, you've got to get back into the flow and everything. Live reading is very different to the regular recorded reading, of course, especially with video and everything. So take some time to get going, and that was like partly why I was just really enjoying the chat as well, so thanks for your patience with that. But it's like, it's nice just to get comfortable, but I was still rusty with that first chapter. I had read through it, but it or nearly all of it, but it's so different just reading it to yourself in comfort and actually reading it live. So, you know, that's how it is. I guess I could have done a full dress rehearsal, but I don't know, it's not really my style. But short break. Like I said, I didn't want to promise anything. That's why I wanted to warm up with a bit of The Hobbit, which is a very popular one as well anyway. But I will go for gold. Alright, I'll be back very soon. I won't bother putting I was going to put a little be right back thing, but I'll be back soon anyway. And then when I get back, I'll change it to 18 to the end or something. Okay. Back soon, Fox fans. Back soon. Fox fans. I doth return with my invisibility cloak on. Just kidding, it's my face. How are we doing? Oh. Oh, yeah, I was mentioning the complete video thing earlier, Lynette. I think you were around, weren't you? So yeah, mid-August definitely sounds doable. Definitely sounds doable. And hello to Sasha. And hello again to Teffy. I did say hello to you because you'd popped in to the original stream before I had that power cut disconnection thing, but I'm not sure if I'd said hello to you in person, so to speak. If I did, well, 2 hellos is better than no hellos. And hello to Picky Mickey. And hello to Boo Boo Kitty. Those names go well together. That's very kind. Good job with the scratch card as well. Good times. Oh, an infectious legume. You've made it as well. Good stuff. I didn't notice that before I headed off. Jake's Great Adventures has been in as well. And Verity has been chatting to Mama Fox. Kind words from Rana and Carly and Bea and Jake Thomas has popped in mid witches drama. Yeah, you've got to get into the witches, Jake, if you're still around. It's the only way. One day I might try and challenge myself to do a really calm reading of a Roald Dahl book, because like even with Fantastic Mr. Fox, I tried to keep it peaceful, but they're just so fun. You know, the drama will always come through. I don't think I could ever read a Roald Dahl book just in a completely like neutral way. It would be incredibly difficult for me. One thing I do need to do, apart from change the text, is to give you the picture time, because I intentionally skip the pictures just to give the flow to the reading, apart from just a little glimpse of Bruno and things. But let me just change this first. Even this is awkward with the mouse pad. So it's 18. I need to shift the box again. Oh no, I'll just shorten this. You know what it stands for. Yeah, that works. Yeah, it's fine. But yeah, we'll have a little picture time. Did I miss anybody else? Holly popped in. Oh, and I Am Fish as well. Just Fish, as I was calling you during the premiere of Treebeard the other day. Nice to see you. Did I miss anybody else? Oh, Jordan also asking about Harry Potter. We've had lots of Harry Potter requests today. Yeah, Victoria was saying hello, and Jordaline reads, you're called. Do you do reading as well, Jordaline? Do tell. Carly giving the winks. Yeah, I agree with you, Lynette, aka Miss Bookworm. Oh, that's cool. That's cool. Legume. Very nice to have you. Yeah, nice to have you back in the live chat, Sasha. Good stuff. You're a booktuber. Is this a term then? Booktuber. I've completely missed this. You read a lot of horror. Yeah, a few people have been mentioning I should give horror a bash. I should check out your channel, Jordaline, and see what you're up to. Alright. The Children of Hurin. Yeah, definitely, Picky Mickey. I don't know if you've seen the poll that I had on my channel. If you go to the community tab on my page, there's a poll just one post down. So you can vote. So yours would be an other, I guess. Yeah, it would be an other. But yeah, it's definitely something I would consider reading in the future, absolutely. We were talking about Silmarillion, appendixes, other works by Tolkien and such. Yeah, Lovecraft is mentioned quite a bit. Booktuber. Yeah. It's passed me by as that one. Alright, so picture time. You've seen this one a few times, but now that I've got the light ring, you can see things a little clearer. It helps the camera focus much better. The light ring might be a little bit too bright now. It was perfect when it was brighter outside. Now it might be a little bit too bright, but I'll look back at it later. It's maybe a little bit harsh. I don't know. I'm completely new to this, so yeah. I'll just calm it slightly. I don't know if that's. Is that better or worse? I'm not good at this. I'll get experience with time. And then we had the boy squeezing under the mattress and retrieving the Formula 86 alongside those petrified little frogs. Bless them. Farmer Giles of Ham. I'm not familiar with that, Lynette. It reminds me of Ham Gamgee or something. And then the seemingly beautiful and so innocent lady, although a little bit disturbing, but the mask of the Grand High Witch peering under the bed, and those frogs. I mean, they're not even making an effort to hide, are they, to be honest? And the boy as the mouse squeezing behind that bedpost. Yeah, Quentin Blake doing these illustrations. So iconic. So iconic. There are some other versions as well, but Quentin Blake is, I think, the most iconic. Ah, right. So I wasn't a million miles off with that, Lynette. Yeah, I've not heard of it. But he does do some lighter things, doesn't he? And he shows his humour, even in Lord of the Rings, but particularly in The Hobbit. But here are the ancient ones that come in with their meek voices, and the Grand High Witch has no patience for them whatsoever. The petrified frogs, we don't know. He asks, "Who are you?" just as the Grand High Witch returns, so we don't get any answer from them. If they can speak, we don't know. He presumes they're children that have been turned into frogs, but we don't know it. We have no idea. It could be some enemy or who knows. and she said that she was going to throw them out of the window and feed them to the seagulls for their supper. And then here's Bruno getting increasingly fat, engorging himself. Oh, thanks very much, Proxy. That's really nice of you to say. Yeah, The Secret Garden is an absolute joy. And that was very casually read by myself, like particularly in the first instance. And the editing was very, very, very light. That's why I called it raw reading, because I was just reading out of the book, and I wasn't practicing anything before I came to it. So I was really, to be fair, I was reading most of that for the first time as I was reading it. Like I said as well, like editing was very, very light, particularly in the first instance. But as it went on, and I was reading it over a very long time span, and I used to release them as individual chapters with chat in between the chapters, before the chapter and afterwards, as like almost like a little podcast episode. I think it was 16 episodes that I called Raw Reading. But as it went on, I did add a little bit more polish. I'd improved my microphone, and I just couldn't help improving the editing as well. Like, as I was improving my skills from working on Harry Potter and a couple of audible things, and Lord of the Rings and other stories and things, you know. So the later chapters are more polished than the earlier chapters. But it's been amazingly popular, The Secret Garden. It so surprised me. It was such a quiet release that when I first started those episodes, they technically launched the redfoxvoice channel, that second channel that I had, and it just came out very quietly. Nearly everybody at the time was very focused on Harry Potter, and my live streaming as that came along as well was popular. Yeah, and a couple of other series were definitely more popular than The Secret Garden. But once I got it finished and that complete audiobook went out, and I added the music and things, it's been a real success. So that's absolutely lovely, because it's such a charming book. I know it's very outdated, and therefore I think almost inherently will be controversial in places. It was written over 100 years ago, and is touching on dangerous themes with colonialization of India and such. But in my opinion, a really beautiful book. And today, actually, a little heads up, I've been looking at A Little Princess. It's been mentioned many times, and I really, really, really have wanted to record something for fans of The Secret Garden. So we've got Dracula on the go, and I'm absolutely returning to that, like I've said. And we've had Animal Farm, and I must admit, like, I expected Animal Farm to excite more people than it did. I mean, it's such a famous story, and I put it together as a little surprise and released the full audiobook, which I don't normally do. You know, I normally do a chapter at a time, and I tease and share samples and everything, and I just recorded the entire thing and put it out as a finished piece. And there's quite a lot of you that have enjoyed it, but it's not had the impact that I expected. But sometimes I think it's to do with the audience, you know, who follow me and what sort of books you like. And maybe Animal Farm, of course, new people can discover my channel and my videos. But, you know, at the moment I've got just short of 17,000 subscribers, and I know a lot of you are big Lord of the Rings fans. There's still some of you that have found me through Harry Potter, some of you through the Chronicles of Narnia, which I've had to stop producing, which is such a shame. and some of you I know really like the live streams and things, and some of you found me through other things. But obviously, like, which videos are most popular on my channel and how you discover me in the first place is probably going to influence what books you enjoy going forward. And yeah, I guess Secret Garden fans, unless you're just fans of all sorts of classic literature and you can appreciate Dracula and you can appreciate Animal Farm and things that I do on the live streams, whether it's Sherlock Holmes or even modern things like To Marry a Prince. You know, some of you have got very, very, very broad tastes, which I think is wonderful. But A Little Princess, I feel like you couldn't do Secret Garden fans much better justice than doing A Little Princess. So I've been considering it for a very, very long time. But you know, I've started so many things and I don't always finish them. And so I've been anxious to start a new thing when I've got things not finished. But it's a shorter book than I thought. So like I read chapter 1 today. And I'll see what I can do. And I don't think I want to read it live. You know, I've got a lot of things going on the live streams. And sometimes I need to take breaks from live streams for various reasons. So I think I would like to present that in a very similar fashion to The Secret Garden. So I might see if I can actually buy the book and read it from the book rather than just doing it from the computer. So I think it would be really nice to give it a similar presentation to The Secret Garden as possible. And another story that I think suits fans of A Secret Garden in a slightly different way would be Wuthering Heights. And it's, you know, it's been mentioned here and there. I've mentioned it here and there. But to be fair, J.R.R. as well, like either of those absolute classics by the Brontes sisters, I think would be ideal. Gives me a chance to play around with the genuine Yorkshire accent and everything. Similar time period. So yeah, I can imagine a lot of Secret Garden fans would enjoy Wuthering Heights and J.R.R., but especially A Little Princess, I think, with it being another one of Frances Hodgson Burnett's. Yeah, I know. I think Mama Fox said that with 1984. Like, some people really, really, really don't mind. And I don't mind. But, you know, all the things going on with coronavirus, they're affecting everybody differently, you know, depending where you are, your current situation, all sorts of different things. So, yeah, I think you're right in some ways. Like, I'm a big fan of 1984. But Animal Farm perhaps is suffering from the 1984 fever in that sense. These dystopian stories. I don't know, like I can find it sort of refreshing and I sort of compartmentalize things. But I can imagine that, and rightly so as well, that they could be seen as too heavy. Particularly with the climate as it is, like you're saying. So, yeah, I totally understand what you mean. Because it's interesting, like Boo Boo, you're saying 1984 is apt. So it feels like some people could be like, yeah, I'm really in the mood for that sort of thing. And then other people could be like, oof, gosh, no, I couldn't touch 1984 or Animal Farm at the moment. It just feels way too heavy, you know. And then, like you're saying, Proxy, like some people are going to be enjoying something lighter or something with more escapism, really, you know. I just noticed I lost. I think I lost connection just for a split second there. It was saying that I dropped a frame. So hopefully you're not buffering too badly. Yeah, but that's nice, Rachel. You're talking about Dracula. Yeah, Bronte. No, Dracula's not finished. We've had part 1 of 3, so that was almost exactly 1/3 of the way through, and then we've had 3 more separate chapters out. So we're almost a quarter of the way. Oh, sorry, almost half of the way. Because I've almost finished chapter 14 as well. So yeah, nearly halfway through, but it's not finished yet. Yeah, really, 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 really nice to see some love for the A Little Princess idea. That's fantastic. Oh, and thanks for the praise on Animal Farm. I know some of you really did enjoy it. And I had an absolute blast putting that together. Honestly, I really, really enjoyed it. And I felt that Russian-inspired waltz that I used for the music worked really well. So yeah, it's just one of those things. What was that? But that's nice. Proxy, you saying you think Secret Garden worked so well because of how much I got into it, and yeah, I think that's often the case, isn't it? Like if you can really feel that someone loves the story, loves what they're producing, whether you're doing Lord of the Rings or Harry Potter or whatever, Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings are 2 that I've really, really thoroughly enjoyed whilst producing them, and hopefully that shows. Yeah, I've done a bit of Pride and Prejudice, technically 3 times, Miss Bookworm, Lynette, and I've never got further in terms of narration than about chapter 6 or something. So it was one of the first ones that I ever tried on my original Stephen Garnett channel. So at that time I had The Hobbit, a couple of staves of A Christmas Carol, and then something like the first 4 chapters of Pride and Prejudice. And then when I first started live streaming, doing the first Red Fox book clubs back on Red Fox Voice, I think I did like 4 or 5 of those chapters because of some time later, And then a few months ago, 4 months ago, I guess it was, I did those first few chapters again. And I've got Pride and Prejudice right here, this illustrated version. And just before I get on with the witches, I think you can finally appreciate how pretty this version is. The light ring is going to be causing quite a bit of reflection. Oosh, it's a heavy. Oh, it's a bit awkward. I can't see how this is displayed. But it's really nice, and because it's so large as well, it's a very pleasant reading experience. You see how it's laid out, and with this calligraphy here as well. It's really, really, really nice. So yeah, that's another one that I really should make some progress with at some point. So many books, so little time. Yeah, Poe has been mentioned various times. The touchy stuff. Yeah, I think it would be a nice one to produce, though. Yeah, I know what you mean, Olivia. This is what I was sort of getting at when you're saying, in the right mood, watching a disaster movie can be weirdly cathartic. I can be like that with World War II, like well-made, realistic, gritty World War II films or dramas. It sort of puts things into a different perspective. Oh yeah, there's a lot of restrictions, Proxy, believe me. Yeah, I've had all sorts of issues. Oh, thanks very much, Gabby, and welcome. And thanks for the praise. I've just seen, Anne, you were saying that you really enjoyed Secret Garden as well, and there's a few others saying the same. It's so nice. Are you getting quite a bit of buffering at the moment? Are you okay? I don't know why it's suddenly acting up. I don't know if it's just simply due to more people using the Wi-Fi at the moment, or what, like a bandwidth issue or something. But to my knowledge, the stream since the power cut has been really, 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 really smooth. And now it's dropping a couple of frames, and when I look at my dashboard, it's saying that I'm not that YouTube isn't receiving enough video to maintain smooth streaming. So there's like a bit of an issue there, but no one has mentioned buffering. Cheers, Picky. It's really appreciated. A hiccup in the picture. Yeah, but I don't like that. It generally is like that. It struggles with the video, and the audio is okay. Yeah, it might just get a little bit choppy from time to time for some reason. But the Wi-Fi is supposed to be very, very good here, so we'll see. And this is Mr. and Mrs. Why is it not focusing now? It's been so well behaved. Come on now. Don't do me like this. It's been doing so good. Suddenly it doesn't want to focus. There you go. Tentative focusing. But this is Mr. and Mrs. Jenkins. I thought that was a pretty fun scene. What else did we have? This is the boy Mouse testing out whether he can unscrew the cap. I don't know why it's struggling to focus now. Like, I understood it before, when the lighting wasn't great back in the old place. It's okay from here. But it was doing so well earlier. But there you go, that's pretty nice. And yeah, that's picture time. That's picture time. Oh, all right. So, the finale of Roald Dahl's The Witches coming up. Tom's Midnight Garden. Yeah, it's a nice recommendation, Victoria. For sure. There's just so many great books. Okay, shall we get back into it? That break was... Oh, come on, Lynette. Come on. Stay with me. What time is it over there, though? It must be the early hours now for you. Like 1 o'clock or something. And hello, Shadows. I'm not sure, actually. I'm sure some of you guys know the answer to Shadows That Glow's question regarding Robin Hood books. 4 to go. 4 to go, Lynette. Whew. Let's do it. I'm getting quite tired myself, to be fair, but I'm not, and I need some dinner as well. It's 9:30 here, and I've not had any dinner, but we're gonna get back into the witch's spirit. Gonna channel the energy of the Grand High Witch for these closing 4 chapters. Come on. Thank you, Aswath. That's really nice. Oh, Winnie the Pooh. Yeah. The Christopher Robin stuff. Oh, and my back's giving in now. I might just lie down here and read from a distance. No, I can't do that. Come on. Why is my back giving it? My back's giving in. I'm getting old. Come on. Okay. Roald Dahl's The Witches. And this is technically chapter 18. In the kitchen. The time has come, my grandmother said. The great moment has arrived. Are you ready, my darling? It was exactly 7:30. Bruno was in the bowl finishing that 4th banana.
Hang on,
he said.
just a few more bites.
No, my grandmother said. We've got to go. She picked him up and held him tight in her hand. She was very tense and nervous. I'd never seen her like that before. I'm going to put you both in my handbag now, she said, but I shall leave the clasp undone. She popped Bruno into it first. I waited, clutching the little bottle to my chest. Now you, she said. She picked me up and gave me a kiss on the nose. Good luck, my darling. Oh, by the way, you do realise you've got a tail, don't you? A what? I said. A tail. A long curly tail. I must say that never occurred to me, I said. Good gracious me, so I have. I can see it now. I can actually move it. It is rather grand, isn't it? I mention it only because it might come in useful when you're climbing about in the kitchen, my grandmother said. You can curl it around, and you can hook it onto things, and you can swing from it and lower yourself to the ground from high places. I wish I'd known this before, I said. I could have practiced using it. Too late now, my grandmother said. We've got to go. She popped me into her handbag with Bruno, and at once I took up my usual perch in the small side pocket so that I could poke my head out and see what was going on. My grandmother picked up her walking stick, and out she went into the corridor to the lift. She pressed the button, and the lift came up, and she got in. There was no one in there with us. Listen, she said. I won't be able to talk to you much once we're in the dining room. If I do, people will think I'm dotty and talking to myself. The lift reached the ground floor and stopped with a jerk. My grandmother walked out of it and crossed the lobby of the hotel and entered the dining room. It was a huge room with gold decorations on the ceiling and big mirrors around the walls. The regular guests always had their tables reserved for them, and most of them were already in their places and starting to eat their suppers. Waiters were buzzing about all over the place, carrying plates and dishes. Our table was a small one beside the right-hand wall about halfway down the room. My grandmother made her way to it and sat down. Peeping out of the handbag, I could see in the very centre of the room 2 long tables that were not yet occupied. Each of them carried a notice fixed onto a sort of silver stick, and the notices said, Reserved for members of the RSPCC. My grandmother looked towards the long tables, but said nothing. She unfolded her napkin and spread it over the handbag on her lap. Her hand slid under the napkin and took hold of me gently. With the napkin covering me, she lifted me up close to her face and whispered,
"I'm about to put you on the floor under the table. The tablecloth reaches almost to the ground so no one will see you. Have you got hold of the bottle?" "Yes," I whispered back. "I'm ready, Grandmama."
Just then, a waiter in a black suit came and stood by our table. I could see his legs from under the napkin, and as soon as I heard his voice, I knew who he was. His name was William. "Good evening, madam," he said to my grandmother. "Where is the little gentleman tonight?" "He's not feeling very well," my grandmother said. "He's staying in his room." "I'm sorry to hear that," William said. "Today there is green pea soup to start with, and for the main course you have a choice of either grilled fillet of sole or roast lamb." "Pea soup and lamb for me, please," my grandmother said. "But don't hurry it, William. I'm in no rush tonight. In fact, you can bring me a glass of dry sherry first." "Of course, madam," William said, and he went away. My grandmother pretended she had dropped something, and as she bent down, she slid me out from under the napkin onto the floor under the table.
"Go, darling, go,"
she whispered. Then she straightened up again. I was on my own now. I stood clasping the little bottle. I knew exactly where the door into the kitchen was. I had to go about halfway round the enormous dining room to reach it. Here goes, I thought. And like a flash, I skittled out from under the table and made for the wall. I had no intention of going across the dining room floor. It was far too risky. My plan was to cling close to the skirting of the wall all the way round until I reached the kitchen door. I ran. Oh, how I ran. I don't think anyone saw me. They were all too busy eating. But to reach the door leading to the kitchen, I had to cross the main entrance to the dining room. I was just about to do this when in poured a great flood of females. I pressed myself against the wall, clutching the bottle. At first I saw only the shoes and ankles of these women who were surging in through the door, but when I glanced up a bit higher, I knew at once who they were. They were the witches coming in to dinner. I waited until they had all passed me by. Then I dashed on towards the kitchen door. A waiter opened it to go in. I nipped in after him and hid behind a big garbage bin on the floor. I stayed there for several minutes, just listening to all the talk and the racket. By golly, what a place that kitchen was. The noise, and the steam, and the clatter of pots and pans, and the cooks all shouting, and the waiters all rushing in and out from the dining room yelling the food orders to the cooks. 4 soups and 2 lambs and 2 fish for table 28. 3 apple pies and 2 strawberry ice creams for number 17. Stuff like that going on all the time. Not far above my head there was a handle sticking out from the side of the garbage bin. Still clutching the bottle, I gave a leap, turned a somersault in the air, and caught hold of the handle with the end of my tail. Suddenly there I was, swinging to and fro upside down. It was terrific. I loved it. This, I told myself, is how a trapeze artist in a circus must feel as he goes swishing through the air high up in the circus tent. The only difference was that his trapeze could only swing backwards and forwards. My trapeze, my tail, could swing me in any direction I wanted. perhaps I would become a circus mouse after all. Just then, a waiter came in with a plate in his hand, and I heard him saying, "The old hag on table 14 says that this meat is too tough. She wants another portion." One of the cooks said, "Give me her plate." I dropped to the floor and peeped round the garbage bin. I saw the cook scrape the meat off the plate and slap another bit on. Then he said, "Come on, boys, give her some gravy," and carried the plate round to everyone in the kitchen, and do you know what they did? Every one of those cooks and kitchen boys spat onto the old lady's plate. "See how she likes it now," said the cook, handing the plate back to the waiter. Quite soon another waiter came in and he shouted, "Everyone in the big RSPCC party wants the soup." That's when I started sitting up and taking notice. I was all ears now. I edged a bit further round the garbage bin so that I could see everything that was going on in the kitchen. A man with a tall white hat, who must have been the head chef, shouted, "Put the soup for the big party in the large silver soup tureen." I saw the head chef place a huge silver basin onto the wooden side bench that ran along the whole length of the kitchen against the opposite wall. "Into that silver basin is where the soup is going," I told myself. "So that's where the stuff in my little bottle must go as well." I noticed that high up near the ceiling, above the side bench, there was a long shelf crammed with saucepans and frying pans. "If I can somehow clamber up onto that shelf," I thought, "then I've got it made. I shall be directly above the silver basin. But first I must somehow get across to the side of the kitchen and then up onto the middle shelf." A great idea came to me. Once again, I jumped up and hooked my tail around the handle of the garbage bin. Then, hanging upside down, I began to swing. Higher and higher I swung. I was remembering the trapeze artist in the circus I'd seen last Easter, and the way he had got the trapeze swinging higher and higher and higher, and had then let go and gone flying through the air. So, just at the right moment, at the top of my swing, I let go with my tail and went soaring clear across the kitchen and made a perfect landing on the middle shelf. By golly, I thought, what marvellous things a mouse can do, and I'm only a beginner. No one had seen me. They were all far too busy with their pots and pans. From the middle shelf, I somehow managed to shinny up a little water pipe in the corner, and in no time at all, I was up on the very top shelf just under the ceiling, among all the saucepans and the frying pans. I knew that no one could possibly see me up there. It was a super position, and I began working my way along the shelf until I was directly above the big empty silver basin they were going to pour the soup into. I put down my bottle. I unscrewed the top and crept to the edge of the shelf and quickly poured what was in it straight into the silver basin below. The next moment, one of the cooks came along with a gigantic saucepan of steaming green soup and poured the whole lot into the silver basin. He put the lid on the basin and shouted, "Soup for the big party, all ready to go out!" Then a waiter arrived and carried the silver basin away. I had done it. Even if I never got back alive to my grandmother, the witches were still going to get the mouse maker. I left the empty bottle behind a large saucepan and began working my way back along the top shelf. It was much easier to move about without the bottle. I began using my tail more and more. I swung from the handle of one saucepan to the handle of another all the way along that top shelf, while far below me cooks and waiters were all bustling about, and kettles were steaming, and pans were spluttering, and pots were boiling. And I thought to myself, oh boy, this is the life. What fun it is to be a mouse doing an exciting job like this. I kept on swinging. I swung most marvellously from handle to handle, and I was enjoying myself so much that I completely forgot I was in full view of anyone in the kitchen who might happen to glance upwards. What came next happened so quickly I had no time to save myself. I heard a man's voice yelling, "A mouse! Look at that dirty little mouse!" And I caught a glimpse below me of a white-coated figure in a tall white hat, and then there was a flash of steel as the carving knife whizzed through the air, and there was a shoot of pain in the end of my tail, and suddenly I was falling and falling head first towards the floor. Even as I fell, I knew just what had happened. I knew that the tip of my tail had been cut off and that I was about to crash onto the floor and everyone in the kitchen would be after me. "A mouse!" they were shouting. "A mouse! A mouse! Catch it quick!" I hit the floor and jumped up and ran for my life. All around me there were big black boots going stamp, 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 and I dodged around them and ran and ran and ran, twisting and turning and dodging and swerving across the kitchen floor. "Get it!" they were shouting. "Kill it! Stamp on it!" The whole floor seemed to be full of black boots stamping away at me, and I dodged and swerved and twisted and turned, and then in sheer desperation, hardly knowing what I was doing, wanting only a place to hide, I ran up the trouser leg of one of the cooks and clung to his sock. "Hey!" the cook shouted. "Jeepers creepers, he's gone up my trouser! Hold on, boys, I'll get him this time." The man's hands began slapping at the trouser leg, and now I really was going to get smashed if I didn't move quickly. There was only one way to go, and that was up. I dug my little claws into the hairy skin of the man's leg and scuttled upwards, higher and higher, past the calf and past the knee, and on to the thigh. "Holy smoke!" the man was yelling. "It's going all the way up! It's going right up my leg!" I heard shrieks of laughter coming from the other cooks, but I can promise you I wasn't laughing myself. I was running for my life. The man's hands were slapping all around me, and he was jumping up and down as though he was standing on hot bricks. And I kept climbing and I kept dodging, and very soon I reached the very top of the trouser leg, and there was nowhere else to go. "Help! Help! Help!" the man was screaming. "It's in my knickers! It's running round in my flaming knickers! Get it out! Someone help me to get it out!" "Take off your trousers, you silly slob!" someone else shouted. "Ha! Pull down your pants and we'll soon catch him." I was in the middle of the man's trousers now, in the place where the two trouser legs meet and the zip begins. It was dark and awfully hot in there. I knew I had to keep going. I dashed onward and found the top of the other trouser leg. I went down it like greased lightning and came out at the bottom of it, and once again I was on the floor. I heard the stupid cook still shouting, "It's in my trousers! Get it out! Will somebody please help me to get it out before it bites me?" I caught a flashing glimpse of the entire kitchen staff crowding round him and laughing their heads off, and nobody saw the little brown mouse as it flew across the floor and dived into a sack of potatoes. I burrowed down in among the dirty potatoes and held my breath. The cook must have started taking his trousers right off, because now they were shouting, "It's not in there! There's no mouse in there, you silly twerp!" There was! The man was shouting back. You've never had a mouse in your trousers. You don't know what it feels like. The fact that a tiny little creature like me had caused such a commotion among a bunch of grown-up men gave me a happy feeling. I couldn't help smiling in spite of the pain in my tail. I stayed where I was until I was sure they had forgotten about me. Then I crept out of the potatoes and cautiously poked my tiny head over the edge of the sack. Once again, the kitchen was all of a bustle, with cooks and waiters rushing about everywhere. I saw the waiter who had come in earlier with the complaint about tough meat coming in again. "Hey, boys," he shouted. "I asked the old hag if the new bit of meat was any better, and she said it was perfectly delicious. She said it was really tasty." I had to get out of that kitchen and back to my grandmother. There was only one way to do this. I must make a dash clear across the floor and out through the door behind one of the waiters. I stayed quite still, watching for my chance. My tail was hurting terribly. I curled it round so as to have a look at it. About 2 inches of it were missing, and it was bleeding quite a lot. There was a waiter loading up with a batch of plates full of pink ice cream. He had a plate in each hand and 2 more balanced on each arm. He went towards the door. He pushed it open with his shoulder. I leapt out of the sack of potatoes and went across that kitchen floor and into the dining room like a streak of light. And I didn't stop running until I was underneath my grandmother's table. It was lovely to see my grandmother's feet again in those old-fashioned black shoes with their straps and buttons. I shinned up one of her legs and landed on her lap.
"Hello, Grandmama," I whispered. "I'm back. I did it. I poured it all into their soup."
Her hand came down and caressed me.
"Well done, my darling," she whispered back. "Well done, you. They are at this very moment eating that soup."
Suddenly she withdrew her hand.
"You're bleeding," she whispered. "My darling, what's happened to you?" "One of the cooks cut off my tail with a carving knife," I whispered back. "It hurts like a billy-o." "Let me look at it," she said. She bent her head and examined my tail. "You poor little thing," she whispered. "I'm going to bandage it up with my handkerchief. That will stop the bleeding." She fished a small lace-edged handkerchief out of her bag, and this she somehow managed to wrap around the end of my tail. "You'll be all right now," she said. "Just try to forget about it. Did you really manage to pour the whole bottle into their soup?" "Every drop," I said. "Do you think you could put me where I can watch them?"
"Yes," she answered.
"My handbag is on your own empty chair beside me. I'm going to pop you in there now, and you can peep out as long as you are careful not to be seen. Bruno is there as well, but take no notice of him. I gave him a roll to eat, and that's keeping him busy for a while."
Her hand closed around me, and I was lifted off her lap and transferred to the handbag.
"Hello, Bruno," I said.
"This is a great roll,"
he said, nibbling away in the bottom of the bag.
"but I wish there was butter on it."
I peered over the top of the handbag. I could see the witches quite clearly sitting at their 2 long tables in the centre of the room. They had finished their pea soup now, and the waiters were clearing away the plates. My grandmother had lit up one of her disgusting black cigars and was puffing smoke over everything. All around us, the summer holiday guests in this rather grand hotel were babbling away and tucking into their suppers. About half of them were old people with walking sticks, but there were also plenty of families with a husband, a wife, and several children. They were all well-to-do people. You had to be if you wanted to stay in the Hotel Magnificent.
"That's her, Grandmama," I whispered. "That's the Grand High Witch."
"I know," my grandmother whispered back.
"She's the tiny one in black sitting at the head of the nearest table." "She could kill you," I whispered. "She could kill anyone in this room with her white-hot sparks."
"Look out," my grandmother whispered.
"The waiter's coming."
I popped down out of sight, and I heard William saying, "Your roast lamb, madam. And which vegetable would you like? Peas or carrots?"
"Carrots, please,"
my grandmother said. "But no potatoes." I heard the carrots being dished out. There was a pause. Then my grandmother's voice was whispering,
"It's all right. He's gone."
I popped my head up again.
"Surely no one will notice my little head sticking out like this," I whispered.
"No," she answered. "I don't suppose they will. My problem is I've got to talk to you without moving my lips."
"You're doing beautifully," I said.
"I've counted the witches,"
she said.
"There aren't nearly as many as you thought. You were just guessing, weren't you, when you said 200?
"It just seemed like 200, I said.
"I was wrong too," my grandmother said. "I thought there were a lot more witches than this in England."
"How many are there?"
I asked.
84, she said.
"There were 85, I said. "But one of them got fried."
At that moment, I caught sight of Mr. Jenkins, Bruno's father, heading straight for our table.
"Look out, Grandmama," I whispered. "Here comes Bruno's father."
So this is technically chapter 19. I hope everybody's doing okay. Let's continue. Mr. Jenkins and his son. Mr. Jenkins came striding up to our table with a very purposeful look on his face. "Where is that grandson of yours?" he said to my grandmother. He spoke rudely and looked very angry. My grandmother put on her frostiest look, but didn't answer him. "My guess is that he and my son Bruno are up to some devilment," Mr. Jenkins went on. "Bruno hasn't turned up for his supper, and it takes a lot to make that boy miss his food." "I must admit he has a very healthy appetite," my grandmother said. "My feeling is that you're in on this as well," Mr. Jenkins said. "I don't know who the devil you are, and I don't much care, but you played a nasty trick on me and my wife this afternoon. You put a dirty little mouse on the table. That makes me think all three of you are up to something. So if you know where Bruno's hiding, kindly tell me at once." "That was no trick I played on you," my grandmother said. "That mouse I tried to give you was your own little boy, Bruno. I was being kind to you. I was trying to restore him to the bosom of his family. You refused to take him in."
"What the blazes do you mean, madam?" shouted Mr. Jenkins. "My son isn't a mouse."
His black moustache was jumping up and down like a crazy as he spoke.
"Come on, woman! Where is he? Out with it!"
The family at the table nearest to us had all stopped eating and was staring at Mr. Jenkins. My grandmother sat there, puffing away calmly at her black cigar. "I can well understand your anger, Mr. Jenkins," she said. "Any other English father would be just as cross as you are. But over in Norway, where I come from, we are quite used to these sorts of happenings. We have learnt to accept them as part of everyday life."
"You must be mad, woman!" cried Mr. Jenkins. "Where is Bruno? If you don't tell me at once, I shall summon the police."
"Bruno is a mouse," my grandmother said, calm as ever.
"He most certainly is not a mouse!" shouted Mr. Jenkins.
"Oh, yes, I am,"
Bruno said, poking his head up out of the handbag. Mr. Jenkins leapt about 3 feet into the air.
"Hello, Dad,"
Bruno said. He had a silly sort of mousy grin on his face. Mr. Jenkins's mouth dropped open so wide I could see the gold fillings in his back teeth.
"Don't worry, Dad,"
Bruno went on.
"It's not as bad as all that. Just so long as the cat doesn't get me."
"Bruno!" stammered Mr. Jenkins.
"No more school,"
said Bruno, grinning a broad and asinine mouse grin.
"No more homework. I shall live in the kitchen cupboard and feast on raisins and honey."
But Bruno," stammered Mr. Jenkins again. "How did this happen?"
The poor man had no wind left in his sails at all. "Witches," my grandmother said. "The witches did it."
"I can't have a mouse for a son!" shrieked Mr. Jenkins.
"You've got one," my grandmother said. "Be nice to him, Mr. Jenkins."
"Mrs. Jenkins will go crazy," yelled Mr. Jenkins. "She can't stand the things."
"She'll just have to get used to him," my grandmother said. "I hope you don't keep a cat in the house."
We do, cried Mr. Jenkins. "Topsy is my wife's favourite creature."
"Then you'll just have to get rid of Topsy," my grandmother said. "Your son is more important than your cat."
"He certainly is,"
Bruno shouted from inside the handbag.
"You tell Mum she's got to get rid of Topsy before I go home."
By now, half the dining room was watching our little group. Knives and forks and spoons had been put down, and all over the place heads were turning round to stare at Mr. Jenkins as he stood there, spluttering and shouting. They couldn't see either Bruno or me, and they were wondering what all the fuss was about. "By the way," my grandmother said, "would you like to know who did this to him?" There was a mischievous little smile on her face, and I could see that she was about to get Mr. Jenkins into trouble.
Who?" he cried. "Who did it?"
"That woman over there,"